Chapter 741. When Wang Ling opened his eyes again, he was still in the tent. In other people's eyes, he was just in a daze. The heavenly Tao space was a kind of godly domain that ordinary people couldn't touch at all. Wang Ling hadn't expected that the heavenly Tao would actually personally appear this time to tell him not to interfere. At that moment, Wang Ling's gaze fell on Wang Ming, whose military tent was already brimming with murderous intent. Because he had received the heavenly Tao's notice, Wang Ling gave up on his plan to make a move. He tore off a piece of the diary and folded it into the shape of a paper crane. In fact, this was a life talisman that could be used to save Wang Ming's life when his life was in danger. However, the number of times the life talisman could be used was limited. It could only be used on the same person once every 49 days. If the heavenly Tao told him not to make a move, then he wouldn't make a move. It wouldn't be a problem if he helped him out in secret, right? This was what Wang Ling thought. While Wang Ling was still thinking, Super Chen's head suddenly poked over. He had wanted to see what theme Wang Ling had chosen for his summer camp diary, but when he looked over, he realized that Wang Ling was actually folding a paper crane, and his face instantly filled with despair. It's over, it's over. I'm afraid we're all going to fail this essay. Dopigua. Why are you so pessimistic? Super Chen. Wang Ling has always been the equal share king in our class. Now that the equal share king is at his wit's end with this essay, we're definitely screwed. Look, Wang Ling is so bored that he's folding a paper crane. Wang Ling. Dopigua took a look and commented, "You don't say. Wang Ling's paper crane is pretty nice to fold. His little heart is quite deft with his hands." Wang Ling. Inside the military tent, Ghost Headblade was already intent on killing Wang Ling. This wasn't just an act of revenge, because the body of his previous Lolita had already been beaten to a pulp. If he didn't find a new host within 3 days, he would be directly destroyed by the lightning tribulation as punishment. Thus, Ghost Headblade was determined to get this teacher Wang. In a situation where the original host's body had been beaten into a paste, his battle prowess had already been greatly reduced. There were many foundation establishment stage students here, but it was clear that the importance of those students was far inferior to this teacher Wang. The person in front of him was an existence that was personally protected by that lord. Ghost Headblade still couldn't quite believe it, but the head of state's action was already enough to prove Wang Ming's significance and value. Moreover, Ghost Headblade had already set up a barrier. All movements and killing intent within the range of the military tent would be completely blocked. As an ordinary person, Wang Ming couldn't get out at all. Making up his mind, Ghost Headblade decided to take action immediately. The saber light was extremely fast. In this situation, the other party was definitely not willing to become his host, so there was only one way: forcefully parasitizing. And this method was to kill the person who was about to become the parasite first. This stab was aimed directly at Wang Ming's heart. Against an ordinary person, there was no need for flashy skills. The best way to deal with them was to aim at their vitals and kill them in one hit. Wang Ming stared at Ghost Headblade and smiled. "It won't be so easy for you to kill me. Go to hell." The moment it pierced Wang Ming's chest, Ghost Headblade's heart was filled with joy and excitement. His true form was a pitch-black dagger, and when it was stained with blood, Ghost Headblade instantly felt extremely comfortable, as if he was soaking in a hot spring bath. But in the next moment, something unexpected happened. Wang Ming, who had already been successfully hit in his vitals, didn't fall, but actually turned into a wisp of sand in front of Ghost Headblade and disappeared into the air. The next moment, Wang Ming's figure reappeared in another part of the tent. This was Wang Ming's brain deduction technique. "Wang Ming, it won't be so easy for you to kill me." This was Ghost Headblade's first time seeing this technique, and he was indescribably amazed. This didn't look like an illusion spell, and it couldn't be one at all. The young man in front of him didn't have any spirit energy in his body, so how could he cast an illusion spell? The only explanation was that his mind had been controlled. "It seems that you have a very high intelligence." Ghost Headblade stared at Wang Ming and picked up on some clues. He was very experienced and knowledgeable, and could think of the only possibility that could happen to an ordinary person. As long as an ordinary person was intelligent enough, They could use a technique to control other people's brains and create illusions. Ghost Headblade had first learned about this technique when Wisdom Saint President Chi had battled the demon gods back then. It was just that Ghost Headblade hadn't expected Wang Ming to actually know this technique. To be exact, this could also be considered a spell, but it didn't consume spirit energy and was controlled purely with mental energy. Now Ghost Headblade suddenly understood why Wang Ming was so valued. This man's entire brain was a treasure. I was careless, but this technique consumes a lot of mental energy. How much longer do you think you can last? Ghost Headblade sneered from the small pitch-black blade floating in the air. This had hit Wang Ming's sore spot. This was the second time in recent times that he had used the brain deduction technique. The last time was chapter 348. But this battle was different from the previous one, which was when Wang Ming had come prepared. At that time, Wang Ming had deliberately cast the spell ahead of time to cover the entire area. But now, he was using the brain deduction technique in a critical situation. That was to say, no matter how Wang Ming used the spell to avoid Ghost Headblade's attack, he couldn't leave the military tent. And it just so happened that Ghost Headblade had some understanding of this technique of his. As Ghost Headblade said, as long as this battle dragged on, Wang Ming would definitely lose. When President Qi had used the brain deduction technique back then, he had used spirit energy and mental energy to share the damage to the brain deduction technique's mental energy. But Wang Ming couldn't do it. He remembered that the last time he had used this technique, he had instantly fainted because he had overused his brain. Thus, this wasn't a long-term solution. Wang Ming stared at Ghost Headblade warily. Given the current situation, he could only take a gamble. He shouted, "Someone! Save me!" Ghost Headblade sneered. "I've set up a barrier around this military tent. No one will come to save you." But before Ghost Headblade's laughter died down, light suddenly surged from the ground of the military tent. Ghost Headblade was alarmed. "This is an invisible teleportation array?" The next moment, a beautiful figure directly broke through the ground. This teleportation formation was buried underground by Jia Yin. As a qualified bodyguard, Jia Yin fully utilized her omnipresence to the extreme. Wang Ming was delighted to see Jia Yin appear, but he also couldn't help being startled. "What the hell, you're really here?" Jia Yin grit her teeth. "I've been waiting for you underground for a long time. Hurry up and shout." Wang Ming. Chapter 742. Jia Yin had appeared just in time. As a qualified bodyguard and a peeping Tom, Wang Ming was already used to Jia Yin's stalking behavior. He just needed to remember that wherever he was, Jia Yin would definitely be there. Jia Yin's appearance also caused Ghost Headblade to be overjoyed. He now had another option. It was very clear that as someone from the magnificent Immortal Special Combat Brigade, Jia Yin's physical strength and attributes were far superior to Wang Ming's. This was an excellent host body that was hard to come by, and was even several times better than his previous lowly host. Ghost Headblade was secretly delighted. If he could obtain this body and then snatch Wang Ming's brain, he would be invincible. Double host. It wasn't impossible. It was just that Ghost Headblade hadn't been able to find an opportunity before. After snatching this Jia Yin's body, he would snatch the brain, and finally merge the two into a host body. This bold idea suddenly occurred to Ghost Headblade. This was Jia Yin's first time seeing Ghost Headblade's original body, but she was already more than familiar with his name. Back when she had still been in the magnificent Immortal Special Combat Brigade, Jia Yin had once been assigned a mission to hunt down Ghost Headblade. Unfortunately, the mission had failed back then. Ghost Headblade had been too cunning, and in the end he had still managed to escape alive despite being surrounded by so many people. Several years ago, in the failed operation codenamed Project Ghost Hunt, one of the people in the magnificent Immortal Special Combat Brigade had died in the line of duty in pursuit of Ghost Headblade. This had become an unsolved case that year, and until now, there had been no reasonable explanation for it. But when Jia Yin had been hiding underground, she had heard Ghost Headblade's original body's account, and thoroughly understood the whole story back then. Back then, Ghost Headblade had probably abandoned his previous host and forcibly formed a contract with that colleague who had died in the line of duty, and in the end, escaped undetected. The space inside the military tent was truly limited. Previously, Jiayin had tried to break through the barrier set up by the Ghost Head Blade underground, but to her surprise she had failed. Given how weak Ghost Head Blade's current body was, it shouldn't have been possible for him to set up such a powerful barrier. Hence, Jiayin had been particularly cautious in her head-on confrontation with Ghost Head Blade in this battle. She was certain that this Ghost Head Blade definitely had a trump card that he hadn't used yet. In the blink of an eye, the Ghost Head Blade attacked again. His target was already Wang Ming, and Ghost Head Blade was sure that in order to protect Wang Ming, this female Special Forces soldier in front of him would definitely be at a disadvantage. Dang! There was a crisp sound of metal colliding. Jiayin swiftly unsheathed a tactical military knife from her boots and sparred with Ghost Head Blade. For a moment, Ghost Head Blade launched a relentless attack, and Jiayin used the tactical military knife to block it with all her might. Her arms, which she brandished rapidly, turned into a series of afterimages in front of Wang Ming's eyes, like countless flailing tentacles. "You're from Magnificent Immortal, right? It's been a long time since I've seen this blade technique." Ghost Head Blade chuckled as he attacked. Because it was just a small, pitch-black blade, no matter how Jiayin slashed at it, the Ghost Head Blade did not feel any pain. After all, he was now a fragment of an ancient saber. Even if it was just a fragment, it was too naive to think that a mere tactical saber could deal with him. "The incident back then, it was indeed you," Jiayin frowned. She was well aware that the tactical military knife had a limited effect on Ghost Head Blade. Continuing to drag things out definitely wasn't the way to go. In this kind of battle, physical exhaustion was a big taboo. In this form, Ghost Head Blade could ignore the problem of physical exhaustion and injury, but it was different for them. Furthermore, she now had to use a clone to protect Wang Ming. For a moment, Jiayin felt the greatest pressure. But it was her duty to protect Wang Ming, even if she had to put her life on the line. Vanguard Blade. At that moment, Jiayin's eyes darkened. She bit her finger hard and smeared blood on the tactical military knife in her hand. The next moment, she tossed the tactical military knife up, and it actually transformed into a blade array in the air, splitting into countless shadows that enveloped her and Wang Ming. In this way, Ghost Head Blade's plan to target Wang Ming had already been mostly dispelled. However, the duration of this saber array would not be too long. Before the blade array ended, Jiayin had to think of a countermeasure to kill Ghost Head Blade in one blow. Special circumstances required special treatment. Jiayin already couldn't care less about capturing Ghost Head Blade alive, especially now that Wang Ming was in danger. All she had to do was directly execute the criminal on the spot. But contrary to Jiayin and Wang Ming's expectations, when Ghost Head Blade saw Jiayin's blade array light up, he actually stopped his frenzied and fierce attack. "Looks like it's about time." Ghost Head Blade smiled faintly. Jiayin glared at him. "What do you mean by this?" As soon as she said this, Ghost Head Blade's body glowed with spirit light. In an instant, a dark purple multi-edged crystal appeared in the air. Jiayin's eyes instantly widened. "This is..." Wang Ming didn't say anything, but he already knew the origin of this polygonal crystal. This was currently the latest technology developed at home and abroad, but which had yet to be made available to the public. Magic crystal technology. The magic crystal technique was a new technique that was based on talismans. It could seal designated high-level spells in crystals made of special materials. Sealed within the magic crystal in Ghost Head Blade's hand was a level 7 spell. Ghost Head Blade sneered. Lord Night Ghost Spirit Emperor already anticipated that this trip would be risky, so he formulated a risky plan. Even the commander of the master plan, President Dylan, doesn't know about this and is completely in the dark. Lord Night Ghost Spirit Emperor is only communicating with me. Jiayin, what on earth do you want to do? In the fake remains, that bunch of good-for-nothings sacrificed their cells to summon an army of cells. What do you think will happen if I move that army into the remains? Jiayin's expression was extremely unsightly. She knew about the army of cells in the fake remains. If they were all summoned here, it would definitely be chaos. All the students would be in danger. Holding the magic crystal, Ghost Head Blade laughed heartily. Let me tell you one more thing. This magic crystal is a twin magic crystal independently developed by Night Chief. It uses a spatial array for transmission. Have you heard of the Sea and Sky Array? Sea and Sky Array? Jia Yin frowned and looked at Wang Ming. Wang Ming. I don't know either. I only know the Sea and Sky Feast. Jia Yin. Lord Ghost Headblade, they're already preparing to launch the Heavenly E-satellite to purge the cells. At that moment, Lord Dark Fragrance's voice came from the dark purple magic crystal. Ghost Headblade. What a pity it's already too late. As soon as he said that, Ghost Headblade directly crushed the magic crystal on the spot. In a split second, dense array patterns and talisman characters spread out like a spiderweb from Wang Ming's military tent. The Sea and Sky Array was also known as the 100 Li Sea and Sky Array. It could instantly transmit everything within 100 Li. Chapter 743. For a moment, the ground shook incessantly. All the students thought there was a major earthquake, and they ran out of the military tent to check on the situation. The complex array patterns and talisman characters on the ground spread out like vipers, startling many of the students who scuttled up trees like monkeys. Teacher, what is this? A lead teacher was directing order. Don't panic, everyone. These are the array patterns and talisman characters of an array. They look scary, but they're harmless to the body. On the other side, Wu Zhenjian, who had been in charge of the preliminary interrogation of President Dylan and the others, as well as dozens of teachers who had been involved in the operation plan, came out of the military tent one after another. All of them had very ugly expressions on their faces. Who would have thought that something like this would still happen in the end? Wu Zhenjian crouched down and carefully analyzed the array patterns and talisman characters under his feet. Senior Immortal, what kind of array is this? A lead teacher asked. This is the Sea and Sky Array, also known as the 100 Li Sea and Sky Array. It's the highest grade 7 transmission array. Wu Zhenjian frowned. Generally speaking, to set up this kind of array, you need to set it up at least half a month in advance within a radius of 100 Li, and then link it up in a line. But the remains have only just opened, so it's clearly impossible to set it up in advance, so this 100 Li Sea and Sky Array is an instant one. Many of the lead teachers were enlightened. As the chief commander of the teachers appointed by Huaxiu Alliance this time, it could only be said that Wu Zhenjian was in the end Wu Zhenjian. In just a few words, he had completely analyzed the current situation. Furthermore, Wu Zhenjian could already tell that the person who had summoned the array definitely had the rumored magic crystal. This was a new type of technology that had yet to be clearly announced in various countries. It could seal high-level spells in crystals, and when necessary, they could be crushed to instantly cast spells. On the side, Wang Ling also followed a group of students up the tree. Although he wasn't afraid of the magic array under his feet, he still chose to go with the flow. This was the reaction a normal foundation establishment student should have, otherwise it would definitely look very strange. The truth was that he had been observing the movements in the military tent the whole time. The moment Ghost Headblade took out the magic crystal, Wang Ling had already guessed that something bad was going to happen. Of all the dark forces they had come into contact with so far, it could only be said that Night Chief was indeed the greatest threat. That was because Night Chief was a foreign power to begin with. Even Huaxiu Nation's officials were unable to directly root out this organization. Even if this group of members was overthrown at home, as long as their overseas headquarters still existed, Night Chief would still be able to get away with it. Thus, it would be best if this incident could attract the attention of the International Cultivation Police Department. Now that Night Chief was planning to make a move on the students, this was the best reason to report it to the International Cultivation Police Department. But Wang Ling didn't plan to make a move, because there were enough teachers present to ensure the students' safety. These teachers were all top-notch experts. Moreover, among this group of experts, there was an important figure hidden behind them. Wang Ling's gaze fell indifferently on a middle-aged man not far away. He knew this lord was about to make his move. At the same time, Huaxiu Alliance's headquarters was also alarmed by this situation. 100 secrets and one careless mistake. President Qi put both hands on the table, leaving a deep palm print on it. He could no longer maintain his composure at the scene in front of him. He actually possesses a magic crystal? The other 10 great generals, who were standing beside them, were shocked as well. It would not be an exaggeration to say that Ghost Headblade bringing out this magic crystal was something that no one had anticipated. President Qi made an emergency response. The moment he discovered that the Sea and Sky Array had been activated, he immediately ordered General Bai to join forces with the Songhai Mahjong Squad and Huaxiao Alliance cultivators to set up a protective barrier. On the other side, he would remotely mobilize the Heavenly E-satellite to launch a Heavenly E-bomb in space to wipe out the Summon Cell army in one go. The Heavenly E-bomb was extremely powerful, but General Bai was on the fake remains. As long as the barrier was set up, casualties and losses in the fake remains could be minimized. Even if Huaxiao Alliance cultivators were affected by the Heavenly E-bomb, it would at least be a lot better than if the students were hurt. There was nothing he could do about it. How long until the Heavenly E-satellite is activated? President Qi asked anxiously, his cheeks already drenched in cold sweat. Lord President, the Heavenly E-satellite is still in the charging stage, and will need another 5 minutes. But the Sea and Sky Array will be activated smoothly in another minute. A technician said. So fast? General Yi was astonished. President Qi frowned deeply. The spells sealed in the magic crystal are all built-in spells that have already been set up. Whenever they're used, they're cast instantly. It looks like it's already too late. Lord President, what should we do now? The technician asked. 1. Immediately inform the Special Operations Team led by Audiobook to cooperate with the lead teachers to evacuate the students. 2. Request His Excellency the Head of State to make a move. It would be best if he could destroy this Sea and Sky Array and interrupt the transmission. President Qi said resolutely. But this would be extremely difficult. The Sea and Sky Array was the most powerful level 7 spell array, and also the most difficult to destroy, because it covered such a huge area. Finding the core array pattern was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Even the head of state might not be able to find it. But now, it seemed that there was no other way. Audiobook soon received news from President Qi. Because most of the troops were stationed deep in the forest, they had been searching for them for a long time. Now that they were almost there, they hadn't expected a new unforeseen event. Now the whole forest was like a bouncing trampoline as every inch of the ground shook. Fatty Luo jumped up and down along with the vibrations. The dark sect this time is probably richer than Immortal Mansion. They've even revealed their undisclosed technology first. Don't tell me they have their own research team behind them? This is a rebellion. Audiobook sighed. This was a classic case of not being afraid of fighting with hooligans, but afraid of hooligans being cultured. Watching Fatty Luo jump around, Little Silver felt a little bad in his heart. Mr. Luo, please stop jumping. Are you dancing on shit? Fatty Luo. Audiobook. Now isn't the time to joke around. We have to think of a way to protect the children first. What's the plan? Fatty Luo asked. Audiobook cupped his chin in his hand and thought for a bit. Then he gazed at the bandaged girl next to him. Wuji, can you move the entire array? Wuji shook her head. Do you want me to die of exhaustion? It's very tiring to move such a large array. No way, no way. At that moment, Audiobook took out a ring and smiled at Wuji. Wuji, I advise you to be kind. Grenade Throwing Senior Immortal gave me 5 of the 10 flames of purification previously. Could he still give this thing away? Wuji's face instantly changed. Yes, Master, I'll go right away. Chapter 744. This was an instantaneous Sea and Sky Array, and it was almost impossible to stop it midway. There were only 2 solutions in this situation. 1. Find the core array pattern and destroy the foundation of the Great Array, so that it couldn't be stabilized and thus disintegrated. Otherwise, as long as the cell summoning array on the fake remains existed, the summoned cells would be continuously transmitted over. But the Sea and Sky Array was too huge, and the array pattern was extremely complicated. It was almost impossible to find the core array pattern in a short period of time. The second solution was to find a way to move the Sea and Sky Array elsewhere, and then use a large-scale spell to directly destroy it. This seemed to be the most feasible method at the moment. However, it would cause serious damage to the real remains itself. On the fake remains side, Lord Dark Fragrance, who had used the cells at work spell to summon cells, looked at the dozen or so Night Chief members who had already completely withered. Back then, Lord Dark Fragrance had suggested using cells to summon cells to save his life, but this move was extremely harmful to the body, and wasn't just as simple as shortening one's lifespan. The reason why it was said to shorten one's lifespan was completely a stopgap measure. In normal circumstances, summoning 1 or 2 cells to do battle would indeed consume some lifespan, which wasn't a big deal. But for such a large number of white blood cells and red blood cell armies, the problem wasn't as simple as burning lifespan. Under such a powerful summoning spell, all the cells of a person would ultimately be sacrificed, and all the organs in the body would be consumed. Every drop of vital essence in the body would be completely burned away. As the master of the array, Dark Fragrance could naturally control the array to protect himself and be safe. He and Ghost Headblade had already received a secret order from Night Ghost Spirit Emperor to use this special method in a special situation. This move was very much like throwing caution to the wind, but it also posed a huge problem for Huaxiao Alliance, because destroying the sea and sky array would damage the real remains no matter what. In the last few years, Huaxiao Nation had been relying on their words to protect Beast King's remains to firmly control the entrance to Devil Valley's secret land. If this sea and sky array was handled improperly now, as long as it caused some international public opinion, other countries would definitely take advantage of the situation and apply to the International United Cultivators Association to jointly manage Devil Valley. That would truly be the point where it would be hard to get off. At this moment, within the range of the sea and sky array in the forest, a large expanse of thick fog rose. This was a sign that the array formation had been activated. Many of the leading teachers began to organize the students to retreat into the rainbow glass box. This was the most important thing to do now. As long as the students retreated, the teachers could fight on their own without having to worry about the consequences. These summon cells were huge in size, and every single one of them was extremely strong. Even the weakest one was at the gold core stage. Even if the foundation establishment stage students joined forces, they would only be sending themselves to their deaths. The head of state stood in the void and looked down at the sea and sky array beneath his feet. This array covered 1/7 of the dense forest in the east. 1/7 of the forest sounded like a small portion, but there were still many extinct resources within. The portion that was open to the students today was just the tip of the iceberg in this dense forest. A small piece of land that was not even 1/7 of the total territory. Destroying the core array pattern was the best way to prevent the remains from being destroyed as much as possible. But this sea and sky array had clearly been specially processed. An array expert could make a big deal out of the structure of the array pattern, and set up many fake array patterns to conceal the true core. Furthermore, these fake array patterns were no less complex than the real ones. It was like the fake wires in a bomb. The slightest mistake could set off a chain reaction. Unless they were all destroyed in one go, even the head of state wouldn't dare act rashly. He could see that there was something fishy about these fake array patterns. If he destroyed one by mistake, the fake array patterns would rapidly multiply and spread. Seeing that the students in the forest had been safely pulled back into the rainbow glass box, the head of state heaved a sigh of relief. It was likely that the military tents below would all go to waste this time. The children had been evacuated in such a hurry that there was no time at all to retrieve the tents. Is there any way to lock onto the core? The Huaxiao Alliance Command Center received the head of state's question. President Qi sighed. For the time being, there was nothing he could do. If he had been at the scene, he might have been able to use the brain deduction technique to find the true core array pattern. Because everything in the deduction technique was an illusion of the brain, it wouldn't have the slightest effect even if he destroyed the wrong array pattern. But now, unless he could use the heavenly eye to correctly identify the array pattern, all his hopes now rested on Wang Ming alone. As President Qi's disciple, Wang Ming naturally knew the pros and cons of this matter. They had to find the core array pattern in order to minimize the damage to the remains. In the military tent, Zhai Yin, who had activated Vanguard Blade, was evenly matched with Ghost Head Blade. This was a very difficult opponent. Although Wang Ming had lived with Xiaoyin for less than half a year, their tacit understanding had unknowingly risen to a new level, because they had been together day and night. Now wasn't the time for Wang Ming to be trapped in the tent. Otherwise his brain deduction technique wouldn't be able to cover the entire sea and sky array at all. After noticing Wang Ming's meaningful glance, Xiaoyin changed his line of attack and deliberately revealed some flaws. Ghost Headblade's killing intent burst forth as he did his best to kill Xiaoyin first. In the next moment, Ghost Headblade, which had turned into a small pitch-black blade, smashed heavily into the barrier which he had set up, and it instantly cracked. Xiaoyin borrowed the force of the attack to break the barrier in one go. Success! Xiaoyin cried out excitedly. She stayed by Wang Ming's side, and continued to stand guard for him. Almost the instant the barrier was broken, Wang Ming had already sat down cross-legged. He activated the brain deduction technique to the maximum, and summoned the heavenly materials sword in an attempt to find the specific location of the core array pattern. At that moment, the army of white blood cells and red blood cells which had been transmitted from the fake remains had already sprung up from the ground like bamboo shoots after a rain. This was undoubtedly a huge obstacle to Wang Ming's search for the core array pattern. There are actually so many of them. Many of the teachers who had stayed behind marveled one after another. The students no longer had anything to worry about. Under Wu Zhenjuan's command, they all stayed behind to stand guard for Wang Ming. Once Wang Ming found the core array pattern, they would gather all their firepower to destroy it in one go. However, the number of white blood cells, red blood cells, and even macrophages made everyone feel like they were in a sea of people. The number of these summoned cells was too huge. There were actually more than 10,000 of them. Most of the cells didn't have high realms, but because there were so many of them, it was extremely troublesome to deal with them. That Lord Dark Fragrance from the fake remains had already been transmitted over through the sea and sky array to meet up with Ghost Headblade. Brother Dark Fragrance is really skilled. Ghost Headblade looked at the vast army and praised him from the bottom of his heart. Just a small trick, Dark Fragrance replied. The two of them stood in the distance and watched from a distance. They didn't notice Wang Ling's clone standing not too far away from them, staring at the army of cells with dead fish eyes. Just as all the teachers were discussing telepathically how to split up to face the enemy, in the next moment, something that no one could have imagined happened. The cells which had just emerged actually shrank back. Chapter 745. A tremendous oppressive force descended from the sky and swept over the scene, making it impossible to tell what on earth was going on. Who was it? For a moment, all the teachers leading the team, including Princeps, who was about to attack, were deeply shocked. They could feel that there was a powerful master releasing his domineering aura, at an extremely close distance from them. And the most terrifying thing was that this domineering aura actually caused the group of summoned activated cells to shrink back one by one. It could be said that these cells already had a very strong desire to live. Ghost Headblade and Lord Dark Fragrance also had shocked expressions on their faces. The greatest expert they had locked onto was undoubtedly that lord who had disguised himself as head of State 001. But this spiritual pressure clearly wasn't released by him. At the scene, there was a hidden expert who was out of everyone's expectations. In Huaxiu Alliance's headquarters, the 10 generals present couldn't help getting up one by one as they stared in shock at the scene in front of them. After this spiritual pressure of unknown origin descended, President Qi asked the technicians to immediately activate all the gauges to monitor the data. In the end, all 120 spiritual pressure gauges in all of Huaxiu Alliance were filled to the brim. The needle was directly pushed to its highest peak. Furthermore, more than 10 spiritual pressure gauges couldn't withstand the pressure, and exploded in less than a few seconds after they were filled to the brim. President Qi's face turned pale with shock. These spiritual pressure gauges were connected to space satellites and had very strong negative pressure. Furthermore, they were connected in series. Even if the head of state got angry, he could only fill 60 or so gauges at most. But now not only were these 120 gauges all filled to the brim, more than 10 had exploded. Old Qi, this isn't the first time, right? Dressed in his exercise clothes, General Li floated in the air and pinched his mustache as he looked solemnly at the scene in front of him. Next to him, the other 10 generals, including Marshal Jiang, also had puzzled expressions on their faces. Everyone's hearts were as clear as a mirror. Because this wasn't the first time this had happened. The most recent time, during the joint military training exercise for the 6 schools back then, there had been a situation where all the spiritual pressure gauges had been filled to the brim and then exploded. At that time, President Qi had been the one directing it from behind the scenes. Everyone had thought that the gauges had malfunctioned, so they hadn't paid too much attention to it. However, after the maintenance, the technicians in charge of maintenance said that there were no problems with the instrument, and that it was a normal phenomenon caused by the overload of spiritual pressure. At that time, this had become an unsolved case with many suspicious points. This was because General Yi was the only one of the 10 generals who had been sent to participate in the joint military training exercise for the 6 schools, and his limit was 40 spans. The old devil, who had yet to reach his prime, was about 20 years old. Therefore, even if the 2 of them were fighting at that time, it was impossible for all the spiritual pressure gauges to be filled up. As expected, has that mysterious expert shown up again? President Qi frowned deeply. Including the time during the military training for the 6 schools, this should already be the 3rd time this had happened. The earliest time was when the gate between worlds had descended 6 years ago, around the time that the sky-swallowing toad had been defeated, and there had been a peak in spiritual pressure. The whole of Huaxiu Alliance took the mysterious expert's attacks very seriously. But to everyone's surprise this time, including President Qi's, no one had expected this mysterious expert to actually be among the summer camp's lineups. This person has attacked us again and again in secret, so he probably isn't willing to show his face. But this just happens to expose his identity, General Yi said. After the summer camp is over, you can make a list of all the teachers involved in this operation, and we'll investigate them one by one. General Yi's first instinct was that this mysterious expert was among the teachers. Because all the students had already been withdrawn into the rainbow glass box at the scene, the teachers leading the team were undoubtedly the most suspicious. President Qi nodded. Looking at the current situation, this person has attacked us again and again, so he should be a friend and not a foe. But he's hiding in the dark and we can't control him. That's absolutely out of the question. There were still a few days left in the summer camp. Since it had already been proven that this mysterious expert was among them, this was undoubtedly the best time to ferret him out. Because the head of state was with them this time, if the head of state was allowed to test the waters, no matter how powerful that expert was, he would definitely give himself away. It was just that they would never have thought. The mysterious expert, who could cause more than 120 spiritual pressure gauges to be filled up, was just one of Wang Ling's clones. Wang Ling had promised the Heavenly Tao that he wouldn't take the initiative to make a move, but after seeing the sea and sky array, he had second thoughts. Right now, he probably wasn't taking the initiative to make a move. He had been forced to defend himself. Besides, he was really keeping a low profile this time. He had just had his clone force the summoned cell army back, which shouldn't be too excessive. On the other side, under the protection of Zhai Yin and the many teachers, Wang Ming's brain worked at lightning speed as he used the brain deduction technique to search for the core array pattern. Sitting cross-legged on the ground, his whole body flushed red because his brain was working at high speed. Blue veins popped out on his forehead as they pulsed, which was a ghastly sight to behold. Zhai Yin even wondered if Wang Ming's head would instantly burst like a balloon filled with air at the slightest touch. Since the cells summoned by Ghost Headblade had been scared back by Wang Ling's clone, the pressure on the teachers leading the team was a lot less. They kept a close eye on Ghost Headblade and Dark Fragrance, who weren't far away. Dark Fragrance was remotely controlling the summoning array, and had activated the death-defying mode, intending to make a comeback. Just at that moment, Wang Ming opened his eyes. Found it. Seeing this, the head of state immediately pointed through the air, and synchronized Wang Ming's memories with the minds of all the teachers leading the team. Everyone attack! Gather all your firepower. Smash the core array pattern. In an instant, more than 10 teachers rushed out. Following the coordinates in Wang Ming's mind, they successfully found the location of the core array pattern. Boom 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 boom. Endless light cannons and light waves shot out from the teacher's palms and magic weapons as they fired wildly at the core array pattern, sparing no effort. Want to destroy the array pattern? It won't be that easy. Ghost Headblade was furious. Wang Ming had been completely surrounded by the iron bucket array just now, and Ghost Headblade hadn't been able to find a chance to attack him at all. Now that most of the people had been sent out to attack the core array pattern, Ghost Headblade knew his chance had come. He manipulated the pitch-black blade that he had transformed into to directly burrow into the ground, intending to launch a surprise attack from underground. Chapter 746. It was only in that moment that Ghost Headblade realized that the soil in the real remains wasn't ordinary soil. He had directly touched it with his metal body, and his body had almost been corroded. Fortunately, he had reacted quickly. Otherwise he would have been seriously injured if he had been underground for a few more seconds. After learning that the soil was corrosive, Ghost Headblade immediately changed his mind and tried to launch another attack on Wang Ming. Wang Ming was now in a very dangerous situation. Because he had used up too much energy using the brain deduction technique earlier, he was now in a weak state. This state was a little like anemia, where his qi and blood were weak due to insufficient blood supply to his brain. He was sweating all over and his heart was racing. It was like a person who had suddenly stopped running at full speed. And Wang Ming felt uncomfortable all over. He was doing his best to adjust his breathing and control his heart rate. In this situation, a normal qi replenishing elixir wouldn't have much of an effect on him, because this was an injury caused by his mental strength. Brother Dark Fragrance, cover me. At that moment, Night Chief's forces had completely collapsed, and the only people who could salvage the situation were Ghost Headblade and this Lord Dark Fragrance. Both of them were extremely difficult to deal with among Dark Network members. Sensing the killing intent, Jiayin immediately set up an army knife formation next to Wang Ming. Cell proliferation spell. Lord Dark Fragrance's hands formed a seal, and a white cyst-like substance immediately emerged on Ghost Headsaber's pitch-black blade. These cyst-like substances rapidly multiplied on Ghost Headsaber's body like bacteria, continuously replicating themselves, unexpectedly forming an extremely tough and resilient cell armor that could continuously regenerate. Ghost Headblade didn't need to worry about anything else at all. He just needed to charge forward. His target was Wang Ming. The head of state's heart sank at this scene. He stretched out his hand to block the attack, but in the next moment, Lord Dark Fragrance, who had used the cell proliferation spell, suddenly raised his hand and shot out a purple wave of light. Was this a moving light wave? The head of state stared at Lord Dark Fragrance, whose eyes were fluctuating. His aura increased dramatically, and was already completely different from before. The head of state stopped, but didn't gradually focus. Who goes there? Huaxiu Alliance headquarters. President Qi was also deep in thought at this scene as he thought of a high-level spell called the Cell Assimilation Spell. This was a kind of possession spell similar to a spirit ghost. As long as you obtained DNA beforehand, you could use this spell to possess a body from a distance. Most possession spells had a range, and the two bodies couldn't be too far apart, but the Cell Assimilation spell could ignore this limitation. However, there was a time limit. Under normal circumstances, the cell assimilation technique could only last 5 minutes at most when it was used to possess someone. This Lord Dark Fragrance was originally a biological scientist, and his research on cells was extremely thorough. He could even skillfully master a spell like the Cells at Work spell, so casting the cell assimilation spell couldn't be any easier. Who possessed this person? General Yi asked. President Qi sighed and said in a deep voice, looking at the current situation, the only one who can confront His Excellency the head of state head-on is the leader behind Night Chief. Now President Qi finally realized something. So all of this had been premeditated by Night Chief. From the Sea and Sky Array to Night Ghost Spirit Emperor personally taking action, everything had been part of Night Chief's plan. Through Dark Fragrance's cell assimilation spell, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor had successfully possessed Night Ghost Spirit Emperor. This was a memorable scene for Night Ghost Spirit Emperor because it was his first head-on confrontation with the head of state of Huaxiu Nation. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor stared at the head of state and sneered. Your Excellency's smokescreen is pretty good. That humanoid magic treasure was just a step away from deceiving me and crossing the sea. There was no need for superfluous movements at all in a showdown between experts. The two of them faced each other from a distance, and didn't look like they were doing anything, but they were in fact competing in secret. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's intention was very clear. He knew that the time he could possess Wang Ming was limited, so he was deliberately stalling for time. In this situation, the head of state couldn't spare any extra effort to save Wang Ming, and could only rely on Jia Yin and the other lead teachers to ensure Wang Ming's safety. Get out of the way. The head of state stared at Night Ghost Spirit Emperor with a profound look in his eyes, and his body released a frightening pressure. Your Excellency can step over this venerable one first, and this venerable one will naturally step aside. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor laughed. He was completely unafraid. Both of them were true immortals, and judging from the initial clash of auras, the head of state was sure that this Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's strength was on par with his own. If they fought in the real remains, it would definitely be harmful, not beneficial. What was more, this was the first time Night Ghost Spirit Emperor was fighting an enemy while possessing him. Exposing too much definitely wasn't a good thing. What a pity. At that moment, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor suddenly sighed. What a pity that the humanoid magic treasure Your Excellency sent had such good defense, and self-destructed before we could analyze it. Otherwise, this venerable one would have studied it carefully, and then called a deity spirit car to send it back. In any case, it's just an old man robot that doesn't look very beautiful. No matter how beastly some deity spirit car drivers are, they probably won't go so far as to lay their hands on an old man. Hearing this, the head of state's face darkened. He did his best to maintain his composure. He knew that the other party was trying to goad him into making a move. For a moment, the confrontation between the two great experts was in a deadlock. Elsewhere, Ghost Headblade advanced unimpeded under the cover of Night Ghost Spirit Emperor and Dark Fragrance's cell proliferation spell. For a moment, Jia Yin was under immense pressure. The lead teachers who had been left behind weren't as strong as her, and they lacked combat experience, so they had no idea what to do in the face of these menacing criminals. After receiving Wang Ming's coordinates, most of the teachers attacked the core array pattern. As long as the sea and sky array didn't disappear for even a moment, the real remains would be in danger of being destroyed. Space slash. Ghost Headblade dashed forward as fast as a beam of light. The moment he got close, Jia Yin's expression abruptly changed. It was actually a space slash. This was a purely suicidal saber technique. Jia Yin never thought that Ghost Headblade, who had been clamoring for a host earlier, would actually use such a suicidal blade technique in the blink of an eye. Go to hell. Ghost Headblade let out a low sneer, and the blade cut through the cracks in the air as it directly pierced through Jia Yin's body. But contrary to Ghost Headblade's expectations, it seemed that Jia Yin hadn't been hit. Her body appeared on the other side. Jia Yin had been saved by Wang Ming's brain deduction technique. Ghost Headblade was flustered and exasperated, but he didn't stop attacking. Just as he was about to attack Wang Ming, the latter suddenly clutched his head and let out a pained roar. The next moment, a black hole rose from the top of Wang Ming's head. Chapter 747. August 1st, Tuesday in the 15th week of the semester. Wang Ming had disappeared on his birthday. To be exact, the exact time of his disappearance should have been a little earlier. The summer camp activities had to be temporarily suspended. Right now, the most important task was to send someone to search for Wang Ming. Of course, the students didn't know about Wang Ming's disappearance. Most of them had been in the glass box when it happened, and had no idea what was going on in the outside world. As the chief commander of the teachers, Wu Zhenjuan's explanation for the temporary suspension of the summer camp was that a group of foreign rebels had been caught yesterday, and they needed to assign some people to conduct a preliminary interrogation. After the interrogation was over, the summer camp would resume as usual. Apart from Wang Ling and Fang Xing, no one else in the line of students knew the truth. The only good news was that the sea and sky array had been dispelled, and Lord Dark Fragrance, who was responsible for the cell summoning, had also been taken down by the head of state after the effects of the cell assimilation spell ended. After that, Audio's special operations team arrived and entered the rainbow glass box to attend the meeting with Wu Xinjuan. Jiayin was supposed to be at the meeting, but because of the battle and her deep self-blame, the moment Wang Ming was sucked into the black hole, she had collapsed. The medical team had no choice but to give her a strong sedative and force her to rest. In the conference room inside the rainbow glass box, Audio took Little Silver and Fatty Luo with him, while Wuji transformed into her original form and was stored in Audio's storage space. Right now, Limitless Sword God's identity could not be revealed, or else it would attract unnecessary trouble. Wu Xinjuan, let me introduce these two people to Mr. Luo Chuang and Mr. Silver, the Special Operations Team's right-hand men this time. I met them on the Cultivation Forum, and they're very good friends with me and Great Death Courting Senior. Audio introduced Fatty Luo and Little Silver. Wu Xinjuan nodded. Fatty Luo and Little Silver had to have been specially vetted by the authorities to be able to enter the remains as part of the Special Operations Team. So Wu Xinjuan hadn't asked too much about their identities. In fact, as soon as he heard that they were friends of that Great Death Courting Senior, Wu Xinjuan knew that there was basically nothing wrong with them. Great Death Courting Senior was a famous person in the circle. His realm was not high, but his ability to court death was strong. All these years, not only had he been fighting evil forces everywhere, he had also been busy doing charity work. Although Wu Xinjuan hadn't had any special contact with Grenade-throwing Senior Immortal, he had heard about him through various grapevines. To sum it up in one sentence, not only did this person like to court death, his family also had a mine. Clearing his throat, Wu Xinjuan said, "Next, I'll explain to Director Zhuo what's happening now." This was a secret meeting for Audio's Special Operations Team, and Wu Xinjuan and Audio's team were the only ones in the huge conference room. Wu Xinjuan. Thanks to Teacher Wang, the sea and sky array has already been broken. However, a small number of activated white blood cells, red blood cells, and macrophages are still roaming around the ruins. We've already sent some teachers to track them down. The Dark Network fugitive, codenamed Dark Fragrance, gave these cells a new order before he was arrested, asking them to destroy the spirit plants. This was already a broken pot that had been smashed. Can't we destroy the summoning array? Audio sighed. Wu Xinjuan shook his head. Although the summoning array in the fake remains was destroyed through the sea and sky array's transmission, the activated cells that were teleported to the real remains weren't affected by the array's range. I see. Audio nodded. Wu Xinjuan. The second thing I want to talk about is that Teacher Wang and Ghost Headblade were sucked into the black hole during the operation this time. According to President Qi of Huaxiao Alliance, this black hole wasn't a space fissure formed by the space slash, but a special side effect of Teacher Wang's brain deduction technique when it was overloaded. Audio, Little Silver and Fatty Luo were blank when they heard this, and didn't quite understand what he meant. Wu Xinjuan thought for a bit, then gave a simpler explanation. Actually, to put it simply, Director Zhuo can understand it as Teacher Wang's mental fluctuations affecting the real world, because his brain was overworking, thus creating the legendary brain hole. That black hole is actually a brain hole. Audio was silent for a long time. After a while, he looked up at Wu Xinjuan. What are Teacher Wang's chances of survival? He wanted to hear Huaxiao Nation's official data on Wang Ming's chances of survival. Actually, Audio knew that there was a high chance that Wang Ming wouldn't die at all. After all, he was a man backed by Shifu. Furthermore, when Audio had seen Shifu's relaxed expression during the meeting, his heart had instantly become as clear as a mirror. He speculated that Shifu had most likely given Wang Ming a resurrection token. Wu Xinjuan's face darkened at Audio's words. After a while, he looked up at Audio. A brain hole is also a special form of a spatial storm. If a cultivator falls into one and isn't prepared, their chances of survival are less than 30%, unless they're almighties at or above itinerant immortal level, whose physical qualities allow them to travel through the spatial storm. Given that Teacher Wang is immortal, his chances of survival are very low. After saying that, Wu Xinjuan raised his little finger. This is Teacher Wang's current chances of survival. Audio, 1%. Wu Xinjuan, 1 in 10,000. Audio. By the time the meeting ended, It was already the wee hours of August 1st. 2/3 of the teachers in the rainbow glass box had been sent out to look for Wang Ming, even if many of them knew in their hearts that his chances of survival were very slim. And there was probably no one here who was more familiar with the spatial storm than Wuji. It was true that a spatial storm was very scary. If it was just a mortal body, it would be torn to shreds in an instant once it was sucked in. But Wuji had another opinion. A brain hole isn't the only thing that can lead to a spatial storm. It's just that there's a higher probability of it forming, Wuji said. There's another situation, and that's spatial turbulence. If it's in a spatial turbulence, Mr. Wang's chances of survival will be much higher. Space turbulence was a spatial anomaly with a very low probability of occurring. People who were swallowed by it would drift in space for a very long time, and in the end would be spat back into their original world. Of course, the position in which they would be spat out would definitely change. It was random. Chapter 748. Wang Ming woke up. The first thing he felt was sharp pain, as if his head had been cut open with a watermelon knife. This feeling lasted for a very long time before Wang Ming recovered a little. Even when he moved, he didn't dare make too big of a movement for fear of hurting his head. By the time he sat up straight to figure out where on earth he was, it had already been 2 hours since he had opened his eyes. Tormented by the headache, he was covered in sweat when he sat up, and the white coat he was wearing was already soaked through. Now he could finally see his surroundings clearly. He was in the middle of an aurora. The scene in front of him was a sea of glass with no end in sight. The sky was full of bright purple and red auroras, which intertwined and dazzled the eyes. And now he was sitting on the bamboo raft that the heavenly materials sword had turned into, drifting in the sea of glass. Is this what old Qi meant by brain hole? After calming his thoughts, Wang Ming thought about why he was here. He remembered very clearly that he had forcibly used the brain deduction technique to save Jai Yin while his brain was overloaded, which was why he had ended up like this. If it hadn't been for the heavenly materials sword, he would have already been torn to shreds by the storm the moment he had been sucked into the space. High-end magic swords all had a Save the Master Spirit Blade mechanism, and the activation of this mechanism usually depended on the sword spirit. The better the rapport between the sword and its master, the more likely the sword spirit would come out to block the blade, in a critical moment, even at the cost of its own life. But Wang Ming's heavenly materials sword didn't have a sword spirit, and this Save the Master Spirit Blade mechanism was nothing more than a similar effect that Wang Ming had created using scientific methods. In any case, the heavenly materials sword was a rare magic sword that Chengyu had created at great cost. When he had redesigned the heavenly materials sword back then, Wang Ming had thought that apart from adding some scientific elements to it, he would also do his best to conform to the traditional definition of a magic sword. Simply put, his scientific magic sword could do the same thing as a regular magic sword. It was just that Wang Xing never thought that this idea he had back then would actually come in handy at this moment. "Brat, you're awake?" Just as Wang Ming was pondering how to get out, Ghost Headblade's voice rang out from the bamboo raft. Startled, Wang Ming hurriedly sat back on his haunches. After taking a closer look, he realized that Ghost Headblade really was on the bamboo raft. The heavenly materials sword savior mechanism could only be activated on its owner. Wang Ming guessed that the heavenly materials sword had probably mistaken Ghost Headblade's blade form for his magic treasure, so it had saved him as well. This could be considered a flaw in Wang Ming's design. Wang Ming grit his teeth. He hadn't expected to slip up so easily. If he could get out of here in the future, he must fix this bug. If he could get out. However, Ghost Headblade's situation seemed to be even worse than his. Logically speaking, Ghost Headblade would definitely kill him, but Ghost Headblade wasn't in a hurry to act. He quietly laid in his blade form in front of the bamboo raft, not even revealing a hint of killing intent. Or perhaps, Ghost Headblade no longer had the strength to display his killing intent. "I didn't expect that in the end, I would fall into trouble with you, and get sucked into the Dead Sea of Space." Dao's voice was very weak. Was this the Dead Sea of Space? Wang Ming narrowed his eyes and didn't dare make any big movements. He had been so startled by Ghost Headblade's voice that he had sat back on his haunches, But in the end, his head had almost exploded. He remembered that old Chi had taught him about the cultivation vacuum before. The Dead Sea of Space could be considered a type of space turbulence, which was a little better than a space storm. However, when you were sucked into it, you would still suffer the pain of space being torn apart. The only difference was that the space turbulence phenomenon corresponded to the Dead Sea of Space. This kind of environment was slightly safer, while the space storm corresponded to an even bigger storm. Unless one was an almighty cultivator, most people would not be able to return after entering. Wang Ming stretched his hand out of the bamboo raft and lightly dipped it in a drop of the Dead Sea of Space's water. This was a type of space liquid which was extremely buoyant. It was bottomless and wouldn't be dangerous if you touched it lightly, but you absolutely couldn't immerse yourself in it for a long time. Otherwise, no matter how strong you were, the space liquid would slowly corrode you. If you were to throw the demon head blade off the bamboo raft now. Wang Ming instantly had a bold idea. But this idea was quickly interrupted by Ghost Headblade's voice. Brat. I know what you're thinking. I'm warning you. I'm in so much pain that I can barely move right now. But if you dare make a move on me, believe it or not, I'll immediately cut your throat and take you down with me. Wang Ming withdrew his thoughts. His intuition told him that this wasn't an alarmist talk. Given Ghost Headblade's current state, it was impossible for him to possess Wang Ming's body for the time being, but he definitely had the strength to take him down with him. The heavenly materials sword had now turned into a bamboo raft to protect her. And this was the only weapon Wang Ming had left. If he still had the heavenly materials sword, he might still be able to put up a fight against Ghost Headblade, who was almost at death's door. But since he couldn't directly use the heavenly materials sword, it was definitely an irrational choice to fight force with force. After all, he was just a mortal. Of course, I still have to save the last bit of strength to get out of here. If you don't have any ill intentions towards me, I naturally won't attack you. It won't do me any good. Ghost Headblade smiled bitterly. You still want to get out of here? Wang Ming was amused. Once we're sucked into the Dead Sea of Space, unless we can tear the space ourselves, we can only wait for the space to expel foreign objects and spit us out. What do you think are the chances of that? A lot of people misunderstood the phenomenon of space turbulence, and that was that after being sucked into it, the space would spit you out on its own in a few hours. Indeed, the Dead Sea of Space would spit out living things in a few hours in the real world, but the flow of time inside was different from that in the real world outside. For every day spent drifting in the Dead Sea of Space, only 10 minutes had passed in the outside world. It looks like you know a lot about the Dead Sea of Space? Ghost Headblade gave a sinister laugh. As you said, it's almost impossible for me to get out in my current state. But I dare to speculate that you definitely have a way to get out. Your brain can help me get out of danger, so this is one of the reasons why I chose not to kill you. Speaking up to this point, Ghost Headblade's voice suddenly turned cold. So now you only have two choices. 1. Perish together with me. 2. We'll work together and get out. Fine, I choose the second. Wang Ming spread his hands and didn't hesitate at all. But when you say work together, how do you mean work together? Ghost Headblade. You think of a way out, I'll cheer you on. Chapter 749. Wang Ming wasn't a fool. Since they were going to work together to escape, Ghost Headblade had to pay a price, otherwise it would be a huge loss for him. Although Ghost Headblade claimed that he wanted to throw caution to the wind in the current situation, Wang Ming felt that Ghost Headblade's chances of survival were higher. Ghost Headblade really wanted to get out of here, but that didn't mean that Wang Ming could use this as a threat. Wang Ming remembered what Ghost Headblade had said before. In his blade form, he had to find a host within a few days. Otherwise his soul would be cursed by the ancient artifact spirit and be directly destroyed. That was to say, Wang Ming had to figure out a way to get out within 2 days at the very least. Otherwise, given Ghost Headblade's personality, he would definitely throw caution to the wind and drag Wang Ming down with him. This game had already begun when the two of them had drifted on the bamboo raft that the heavenly materials sword had turned into. Wang Ming realized that if he wanted to survive, he had to race against time. In the end, time flowed differently in the outside world, and he wasn't sure whether Wang Ling would be able to find him. He had clearly told Wang Ling before to keep a low profile as much as possible during the summer camp, in order to avoid arousing the suspicions of the many teachers this time. But Wang Ming had always been looking forward to Wang Ling's appearance. But in the end, it was just that, if possible, Wang Ming still wanted to use his own strength to break through this crisis. At any time, it was better to rely on oneself than on others. He had to survive. He still had too many unfinished business. If he died, who would listen to Old Chi's nagging? He had promised Old Chi that one day, he would definitely become the latter's most outstanding disciple, surpass his father, and live up to his name as the wisdom saint. If he died, what would happen to the research on Head of State 001? This was the work he was most proud of so far. If he died, who would eat Jai Yin's unpalatable dragon pork chop? If he died, what would happen to the research on primordial chi? Who would save his little brother? For a moment, Wang Ming's thoughts raced. Wang Ming had always felt that he was like a flower in a greenhouse. He was always protected and airtight by others. He had never thought that one day he would be in trouble. If it wasn't for this experience, Wang Ming felt that he wouldn't have thought about these problems at all. Wang Ming. He had to do everything he could to break out of here and survive. Wang Ming pondered deeply. The look in his eyes inexplicably reassured Ghost Headblade. This was a gamble. He hadn't chosen to kill Wang Ming, but had pinned all his hopes of survival on Wang Ming alone. As for the promise not to make a move on Wang Ming, and the two of them going out together, promise? How much could it be worth? Ghost Headblade had already made up his mind. As long as Wang Ming figured out a way to get out, he would use the last bit of his strength to possess Wang Ming's body. He didn't have much time left. In less than 4 days his soul would be cursed, and he would perish. He had to live. Only by living could he have everything. Ghost Headblade knew that there was no turning back now that he had come this far. He had been a knife in the hands of others for many years, accepted all kinds of missions, and even made deals with the ancient artifact spirit at all costs to become what he was today. All of this was so that he could live forever. Constantly changing the physical body of the host could, in a sense, achieve a kind of disguised immortality. As for Ghost Headblade, he wanted to bring glory to his sect. Ghost Axe sect was recognized as the #1 killer sect in the circle, and had been founded by Numinous Mother. He was the 3rd disciple of this sect, after gorgeous itinerant and Taoist Taotai. In Ghost Axe sect the strong were revered. Ghost Headblade's lifelong wish was to complete the task assigned to him by his sect. Kill 10,000 people and inherit the sect's true legacy. Thus Ghost Headblade didn't think he could die here. Brat. I advise you to think of a way within 12 hours. Or you'll die without a doubt. Ghost Headblade said in a threatening voice. You don't have to tell me, I know. Wang Ming replied indifferently. I should be able to think of a way, but you know functioning the brain consumes brain cells, and I get a headache whenever I think about things. Do you have anything to eat here? 2 walnuts would also be good for the brain. Ghost Headblade's voice turned cold. What trick are you playing at? Trick? How would I dare? Wang Ming waved his hand with a weak expression. You should know that I'm just an ordinary person, and I can't go a day without food. Ghost Headblade was instantly speechless, because this was indeed the truth, and he had overlooked this point just now, forgetting that Wang Ming was just an ordinary person. What a troublesome brat. Here. Ghost Headblade had no choice but to offer up his tonic. It was a red oval-shaped pill the size of a myrtle. This is a chi-replenishing pill. Ghost Headblade said. This was a level 4 elixir which was exceptionally expensive. Apart from healing injuries, it could also boost one's spirit and act as a fasting pill. This was the only elixir Ghost Headblade had on him, which he had initially saved for the host's body. If the host's body was injured, generally speaking, one pill could heal some of the damage, but now that he had lost his body, Ghost Headblade naturally wouldn't be able to enjoy it. In this current situation, it was more important to work together for a win-win situation. He wanted Wang Ming to think of a way to get out of here first. Wang Ming's recovery would also be good for Ghost Headblade if he wanted to possess Wang Ming later. In any case, after the possession was successful, this elixir would also be used to supplement the host. It was just a matter of time. Thanks. Wang Ming didn't stand on ceremony and directly swallowed the elixir. Since Ghost Headblade wanted him to think of a way in this situation, the elixir he gave him would definitely be a good one, and he definitely wouldn't give him poison. Sure enough, after taking the chi-replenishing pill, its effects immediately showed, and Wang Ming felt his head instantly light up. This elixir just now had restored him by at least 50%, but Wang Ming didn't directly show it on his face, and instead frowned. This elixir of yours, it's not very effective. Ghost Headblade sneered. Brat, this is the last elixir I have on me. It's enough to last you a few days. You can't find any other excuse now, right? Hurry up and think of a way. I've already given you the elixir. As for its effects, it's none of my business. Actually, Ghost Headblade really couldn't guarantee the effectiveness of the elixir. For cultivators, spirit energy was needed to speed up the digestion of this type of high-level elixir. For an ordinary person, it might take a very long time to completely digest it. Ghost Headblade didn't know enough about elixirs, since Ghost Axe Sect only taught killer techniques. Half an hour after the elixir entered his stomach, Wang Ming had already sufficiently broken down its medicinal properties. Cultivators use spirit energy to speed up the digestion process, and Wang Ming used meditation. Meditation could achieve the same effect, but the prerequisite was that one had to have a powerful brain. If Wang Ming wanted to, he could even use meditation to lift himself slightly off the ground, but only for a very short time. On the bamboo raft, Ghost Headblade was a little impatient. Brat, what's your plan? Wang Ming crossed his arms. Don't worry, I'm almost done. In fact, when Wang Ming had first observed the Dead Sea of Space, he had already thought of a way. Chapter 750. This Dead Sea of Space had absorbed too much trash from the outside world, and there were a lot of magic treasure fragments floating in it. If you were lucky, you might even find magic treasures that looked almost intact. However, after being drawn into the Dead Sea of Space, most of these magic treasures had already lost their effectiveness after being soaked in the Dead Sea of Space. The spirit liquid in the Dead Sea had a strong corrosive effect. Of course, that didn't rule out the possibility that some magic treasures could resist corrosion. If he wanted to break out of this Dead Sea of Space, Wang Ming deduced that corrosion resistance was especially important. Thus, these broken magic treasures floating in the Dead Sea of Space were in fact very useful. Perhaps he could find the parts he wanted. Wang Ming took off his white coat and belt. Unfortunately, Wang Ming thought that the long johns were too hot, so he had left them in the dormitory in the glass box instead of directly taking them out. Wang Ming had thought that since it was only the first day of the summer camp, there shouldn't be any accidents. In the end, he had ended up in this situation. Only now did he realize the benefits of the long johns. The long johns had been personally enchanted by Wang Ling, and were especially useful in this situation. Ghost Headblade didn't know exactly what Wang Ming wanted to do, but when he saw Wang Ming move, he immediately understood that the other party probably already had an idea. After taking off his white coat and unbuckling his belt, Wang Ming checked the spirit power in his storage ring. Currently, there was still 72% spirit power left, which was enough for him to carry out the follow-up plan. But Wang Ming couldn't directly say it out loud. This was one of his trump cards, and he absolutely couldn't let Ghost Headblade know about it. Thus he frowned deeply. Wang Ming frowned, and for some reason, Ghost Headblade felt flustered. Brat, what's wrong now? Wang Ming clenched his fists and pretended to think about it. Then, his eyebrows furrowed deeply in an attempt to highlight the seriousness of the matter. I've thought of an idea. Go on. Ghost Headblade said faintly. Our research institute developed a device called the Spirit Power Amplification Cannon before. Wang Ming said. This device can transform spirit energy into a substantial shock wave, which has the formidable power of moving 1,000 caddies with little effort. There are a lot of broken magic treasures floating in this Dead Sea of Space. If I use these parts well, I can build one right away. It'll take me about 2 days. Wang Ming's words were very decisive and full of confidence. Ghost Headblade did not doubt these words at all. The Dead Sea of Space was a place similar to a graveyard for magic treasures. In the past, too many almighty beings had torn apart space during their battles, causing magic treasures to be accidentally drawn into the Dead Sea of Space. Rumor had it that when the Crouching Bull's spiritual master fought the Crimson Firmament Emperor, Liao, their world-defying immortal warship had fallen into the Dead Sea of Space after the collision. That was a long time ago. So long that even Ghost Headblade could not remember exactly how long it had been. If these two immortal ships were still here, they would definitely be an immeasurable fortune. This was because Crouching Bull Daoist and Crimson Sky Emperor Liao had once sealed many of their treasures in the safe in the immortal warship. No matter how corrosive the spatial spirit liquid was, it was impossible for it to corrode a special safe. Moreover, the two immortal warships were huge, and they were world-defying Dharma treasures. It was unlikely that their hulls would be corroded so easily. It was just a pity that these two world-defying immortal warships had drifted to who knew where in the Dead Sea of Space over the past 1,000 years. The Dead Sea of Space was boundless, and you never knew what kind of magic treasure fragments would float around you in the next moment. Hence, with a certain level of understanding of the Dead Sea of Space, Ghost Headblade believed Wang Ming's words to the utmost. There were all kinds of magic treasure fragments floating around here that already looked completely useless, but this strongest brain might really have a way to use these fragments to remake magic treasures. However, Ghost Headblade instantly fell silent when Wang Ming said that it would take 2 days to make them. 1 day. I want you to make the magic treasure in 1 day, Ghost Headblade said after a moment. There was a hint of coercion in his tone. He couldn't wait that long. 2 days was too long for him. Whether this magic treasure could send out a powerful shockwave to break through the Dead Sea of Space's barrier and take them out was still a question. If it failed, it would take time for Wang Ming to make a new magic treasure. However, his original body wouldn't allow him to wait that long. For Ghost Headblade, the curse of the ancient artifact spirit was more like an uncertain time bomb. Hence, he needed Wang Ming to speed up and develop this thing as soon as possible. Only 1 day. Wang Ming's frown deepened. It's not impossible, but you have to help. If you're sure that this cannon you're talking about will work, I can do it, Ghost Headblade said. It'll definitely work, I'm very confident, Wang Ming said. When the cannon is fired, it'll definitely shatter this space wall, and we'll be able to get out. But 1 day's time was really tight. You have to help. What do you want to do? Ghost Headblade asked. I need spirit energy. Speaking up to this point, Wang Ming took out a toolbox from his storage ring and grinned. The tools in this toolbox can only be used if spirit energy is injected into them. If you want to make a magic treasure, you'll need to use the tools inside. You know, I'm immortal, and I usually have assistants to help me in the lab. In a situation like this, you're the only one with spirit energy. Wang Ming's words were half true and half false. The tools in the toolbox did indeed require spirit energy to use, but he usually used the spirit energy sealed in his storage ring in the lab, and could do the work on his own. The ring on his hand wasn't just a storage ring, but also a storage ring. Although there was still 72% spirit energy in reserve, Wang Ming estimated that if he were to remake the magic treasure, he would need to use up at least 40% of his spirit energy, and his ultimate plan would end in failure. So from the very beginning, Wang Ming had just been playing tricks. Wang Ming had originally estimated that it would only take 1 day to make this magic treasure, but he had deliberately said 2 days to let Ghost Headblade bargain. His goal was just to swindle Ghost Headblade out of his spirit energy. Wang Ming took out the tools and lined them up on the bamboo raft that the heavenly materials sword had turned into. He then took a deep breath and stared at Ghost Headblade. Hey, how about it? Do you want to cooperate? You're the one who wants to be fast, but in the end, you're the one who's dragging things out. Do you still want to get out? If you don't, we might as well die together. Fine. I can give you spirit energy. Ghost Headblade grit his teeth, feeling extremely sullen. He felt resentful in his heart, but given the current situation, he could only endure it. He had already decided in his heart that the moment the magic treasure was ready, he would immediately take over Wang Ming's body. Ghost Headblade sneered. In the end, this was just a hothead. Chapter 751. Wang Ling knew that Wang Ming was still alive. After Wang Ling had activated the mind-reading ability, all he had heard were the teachers in charge of this summer camp lamenting Wang Ling's death. He still had the paper crane life talisman that he had made for Wang Ming, which could be used to pay for Wang Ming's life once. But the life talisman had yet to take effect, which was enough to prove that Wang Ming wasn't dead. Furthermore, Wang Ling immediately deduced that Wang Ming was probably in the Dead Sea of Space right now. However, in the hearts of most people, Wang Ming was already dead. Even Wu Zhenjuan was already preparing for Wang Ming's funeral. For example, a funeral photo. In order to protect his identity, Wang Ming had never taken an ID photo in his military uniform. Currently, the only official photo he had on file was the one taken when he had created the fake official ID Wang Shower. In the ID photo, Wang Ming was wearing a dark black short-sleeved shirt and smiling very stupidly. Is this the only photo we have? Wu Zhenjuan sighed endlessly as he stared at Wang Ming's photo. That's right. Another accompanying teacher also sighed. Also, the higher-ups want us to prepare all the information on this incident. I understand. I'm writing up what happened, and I'm also writing up my reflection. Wu Zhenjuan nodded. Next, they could only wait for instructions from the higher-ups. According to Wu Zhenjuan's judgment, if Wang Ming was dead, the higher-ups would definitely directly publicize his identity. Although Wang Ming was just an ordinary person, he was the strongest brain, hiding behind the scenes in Huaxiao Nation all these years. Over the last 20 years or so, he had made great contributions to the technological breakthroughs in various cultivation magic treasures in Huaxiao Nation. Wang Ming's identity had to be kept a secret when he was alive. After his death, Wang Ming's identity and achievements would definitely be exposed in broad daylight. Perhaps Wang Ming's photo would be in next year's math, physics, and chemistry textbooks. Although the authorities only had this one ID photo of Wang Ming. Teacher Wang was also a poor man. I never thought that there would only be one photo. If I had known earlier, I would have taken a photo with him. The leading teacher sighed endlessly at the photo. Then what's the higher-ups' opinion? They thought that we would take some photos of Teacher Wang on the way, but in the end we didn't. The main thing was that the smile on the ID card was too silly and not serious at all. But now there's no other way. Teacher Wang doesn't have a military uniform photo. The higher-up said to Photoshop the head of this photo onto the military uniform and make it into a memorial. Wu Zhenjuan, Wang Ling. Elsewhere, in Huaxiao Alliance's headquarters, the entire headquarters had instantly gone into overdrive after Wang Ming's disappearance. The command center sent technical personnel to connect one-to-one with all the teachers who had gone out to search for Wang Ming in the real remains. In addition to providing relevant technical support remotely, they also helped these teachers connect with the expert group outside the remains. The main role of the group of external experts was to provide long-range support for the teachers who were heading west to search for Wang Ming's whereabouts. The main thing was that the western half of the remains had yet to be fully explored, and currently, only Huaxiao Alliance's team of experts had some unpublished information. The experience of the teachers in charge of the team was limited. If they encountered some poisonous spirit plants that they didn't recognize, as long as there were long-range experts around, they could basically avoid them. Inside the real remains, Huaxiao Alliance already knew the eastern half of the map like the back of their hand, and there basically wouldn't be any accidents. But the western half was still completely unknown. Even if Wang Ming was still alive, if the space spat him out in the western half, it would still be very dangerous. So at that time, President Qi had immediately instructed Wu Zhenjuan to assign some reliable teachers to search for Wang Ming's whereabouts in the west. Apart from Wang Ling, there was also President Qi, who believed all along that Wang Ming was still alive. After learning that Wang Ming was in trouble, President Qi put his hands behind his back and stared straight ahead in one direction for a very long time. General Yi and the other 10 generals had been watching this scene from beginning to end. General Yi hadn't expected old Qi, who was usually so protective of his children, to actually be so calm after learning of Wang Ming's death. But the truth was that General Yi had a hunch that this was all just a facade. After about 10 minutes, President Qi finally moved. He turned around and looked at General Yi. Old Yi, I need you to help me look after the place. All right. General Yi agreed straight away. He didn't say another word. The moment President Qi turned around, General Yi and the other 10 generals present already knew what on earth President Qi was going to do. In everyone's eyes, old Qi was a well-behaved person who had always done things according to the rules. Of course, this didn't mean that old Qi didn't have a bottom line. It had already been more than 4,000 years since Huaxiao Nation had been founded. As one of the 10 founding generals, old Qi's cultivation was naturally unfathomable. But in the thousands of years before he met Wang Ming, this wisdom saint had never accepted a single disciple. All of the 10 generals present remembered old Qi's delighted expression when he discovered Wang Ming back then, as if he had just become a father. Furthermore, at the beginning, they had all been amazed by old Qi's choice. Some of them even couldn't figure out why old Qi would choose such an ordinary person as his disciple. But in the end, it turned out that old Qi's choice was the right one. Wang Ming's appearance had indeed repeatedly provided major breakthroughs in some of the technical problems with magic treasures. Old Qi had restricted Wang Ming's movements, hidden his real information, and protected this disciple of his as if he were the apple of his eye. Now, something had happened to Wang Ming. In fact, everyone's hearts were as clear as a mirror. Old Qi. Thus, when old Qi reached the entrance of Huaxiao Alliance's headquarters, Marshal Jiang called out to him. President Qi stopped and turned his head slightly. What is it? What's done can't be changed. You have to act appropriately. This was Marshal Jiang's reminder. President Qi understood. After a moment of silence, he spoke again. But someone hurt my disciple, so I naturally have to go and demand an explanation. That Night Chief is indeed quite formidable, but I think it's fine to give him a warning. If His Excellency the head of state finds out, he'll definitely be furious. I've already made up my mind. If the head of state punishes me later, I'll take the blame. President Qi pinched his mustache. You haven't accepted a disciple you're proud of, have you? You definitely don't understand what I'm doing today, but I believe that you'll understand in the future. Marshal Jiang was instantly speechless. Also, let me correct one thing. Chapter 752. The 10 generals had all come from that era, and each of them had very deep private friendships with each other, which was why Huaxiao Nation was what it was today. If the 10 generals hadn't been united, the country would have long been riddled with internal strife. Of course, the 10 generals had anticipated from the Night Chief incident that there might be a mole in Huaxiao Alliance's management. However, this matter still needed to be investigated slowly, because they didn't have any concrete evidence. It would naturally be best if they could catch the culprit red-handed. The moment something happened to Wang Ming, General Yi, Marshal Jiang and the others had already had a premonition that old Qi would definitely step forward. Old Qi was famous for being protective of his own. Especially at the research institute, Wang Ming had always been secretly reported by jealous colleagues, but before these reports could reach Huaxiao Alliance, old Qi had stopped them with one hand and destroyed them. Old Qi often said, geniuses were always envied. When he was young, old Qi had suffered a lot because of this. But shielding was one thing, and educating was another. Geniuses all appreciated each other. Although Wang Ming was sometimes arrogant, he had absolute respect for old Qi. They lived like master and disciple at work, and like father and son in life. For old Qi, after he retired one day, Wang Ming was the only person who could take on the position of wisdom saint. Although in the eyes of most people, Wang Ming was still very young and was still lacking in all sorts of ways, from the moment President Qi had discovered him, he had been almost certain that this person was the only hope and expectation he had left in his life. Old Qi didn't leave the Huaxiao Alliance building, but went to his office. He wanted to give those people at Night Chief a warning. But that didn't mean he had to go overseas. Old Qi knew his identity as one of the 10 generals. If he went out like this, it wouldn't just be the head of state who would be alarmed, but the entire international media would be shaken. Thus, President Qi had already made up his mind to use a practical method. Is everything ready? When he returned to the office, a young man was already waiting for old Qi. This was old Qi's office assistant, Qi Mingyu. Old Qi didn't have a family, and Qi Mingyu was old Qi's adopted son, as well as a trusted aide whom old Qi had brought up. He wasn't a genius in cultivation, but he was still passable. Qi Mingyu was a lot older than Wang Ming, and the two of them were like brothers who weren't related by blood, but were as close as real brothers. Everything is ready. The equipment was just tested a few days ago. There won't be any problems, Qi Mingyu replied. When he found out that something had happened to Wang Ming, Qi Mingyu knew that old Qi might make a move, but he never thought that old Qi would actually go this far for Wang Ming. The last time old Qi activated the equipment in his office was when they were fighting against the demon gods hundreds of years ago. In fact, this set of equipment was actually a set of spiritual power amplification diffusion device. The design of the device was very simple. As long as one sat on the sofa in the space capsule and put on a wireless helmet, they would be able to complete the spiritual power amplification. Once he put on the helmet, with old Qi's current mental strength combined with specific cultivation spells, he could easily communicate with people in every corner of the earth, and he could even perform long-range mental attacks. This amplifier had already been upgraded to version 8.0, and Wang Ming had personally completed the last version update. Mingyu, stand guard outside the door. No one is allowed to come in, President Qi said to Qi Mingyu. President Qi then turned a knob in a secret compartment on his desk, and the bookshelf behind him instantly opened to reveal a safe the size of a Rubik's Cube. President Qi looked at it, and the safe opened automatically. With a spirit light, President Qi was directly sucked into the Rubik's Cube. The entire set of equipment had been shrunk using space expansion technology before it was placed inside the safe. This safe came with an array that shrank the Earth to inches, and after confirming one's identity with the pupil, the array would automatically activate. On the other side, Wang Ming was examining the tools on the bamboo raft. As promised, Ghost Headblade had already injected enough spirit energy into the toolbox for Wang Ming to use. After some calculations, Wang Ming realized that there was still plenty of spirit energy in the toolbox. When the time came, he would store the extra spirit energy back into the ring. This is the blueprint for the amplifier. In order to ensure that it can blast through the space wall here, my design parameters are much larger than the original, so that it can hit the target in one shot. It took Wang Ming 10 minutes or so to use the drawing board in the toolbox to draw out the blueprint of the entire amplification cannon, including the parameters of each part, and the corresponding formula at the bottom. Ghost Headblade didn't really understand it, but this blueprint gave him a strong sense of security. Looking at the blueprint, Ghost Headblade suddenly asked, I heard that you're Wisdom Saint's disciple? That's right. Wang Ming was non-committal. Since the other party had already asked, it was enough to prove that he had definitely investigated something, so there was no point in hiding it. Our old Qi also has an amplification cannon, and I designed the latest version, so I'm very familiar with these parameters. Wang Ming said. At the very beginning, the prototype of this device was actually a spirit amplifier. After old Qi developed it, he gave it to a foreign mutants organization. There was a professor who used this device to recruit all kinds of people, and even set up a mutant school. But there was a flaw in the original design. After using too many spirit amplifiers, it was very easy for someone to go bald, so it didn't take long for this professor to become bald. And this mutant school is still around. When I went abroad with old Qi before, I even went there to take a look. Ghost Headblade was suddenly curious and scared. Are you a smith? No, I'm just an inventor, Wang Ming replied. In a broad sense, smiths mainly use furnaces to refine weapons. After smelting the materials, they grind them into shape, and finally imbue them with magic and spirit. But for ordinary people like us who don't have spirit energy, as long as we're smart enough and are good at using modern technology, we can also make magic treasures. However, this type of magic treasure has a dual energy mechanism. Regular magic treasures forged by smiths need spirit energy to drive them, but the scientific magic treasures we forge can be powered by both rechargeable spirit energy and spirit energy. Ghost Headblade hummed in agreement. What you said is what I understand. Actually, Ghost Headblade's understanding of refining weapons was very limited. If it wasn't for Wang Ming, he probably wouldn't have known that there was actually such a difference between modern magic treasures. What Wang Ming needed to do now was to fully establish Ghost Headblade's trust. Chapter 753. At Night Chief HQ, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor looked to be in a very good mood. Although his real body hadn't had direct contact with the head of state, at the very least he had successfully met that bigwig in Dark Fragrance's body this time, and wasn't at a disadvantage at all. What did this mean? If he wrote a news report about this later, and sent it to all the major media outlets, his Night Chief's momentum would grow even stronger. When that time came, the new members it would recruit would greatly bolster Night Chief's strength, and make up for the losses it had suffered in carrying out its master plan in Huashu Nation this time. Only Night Ghost Spirit Emperor himself knew that whether or not level 13 spells existed in the real remains wasn't important. What was important was the impact of this collision, as well as the momentum and impact it would have. It was only in recent years since Night Chief had been established that the governments and militaries of various countries had set their sights on it. But no country had dared to rashly make a move against Night Chief. Why? Because Night Chief's foundation was much more stable than that of the other dark forces. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor had endured for hundreds of years to form Night Chief's core personnel, and devote himself to developing scientific research and technology. Night Chief now had the ability to produce magic crystals, and more than that, the magic crystals they produced were still better than the average level in various countries, and they already had the ability to produce them in batches. What did this mean? It meant that when the time came, as long as Night Chief's members had high-level magic crystals, they would be a sufficient deterrent. Thus, it looked like Night Chief's plan to invade the remains this time had ended in failure. But the truth was that Night Ghost Spirit Emperor was really interested in the international influence it would bring. As for President Dylan, who might be sacrificed because of this master plan, and even Edmark, who might die before the plan could be carried out, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor didn't feel the slightest heartache over the deaths of these two people. In exchange for international influence at the cost of losing two of their top generals, in Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's view, this was a very good deal. Even if the people were gone, they could still recruit more. But influence wasn't something that could be easily exchanged for. Of course, there was also an unexpected factor in this incident that worried Night Ghost Spirit Emperor. That mysterious expert, hidden in the ranks. With just one release of his aura, all those activated cells had actually shrunk back like turtles. Who on earth was that expert? This was a mystery, but Night Ghost Spirit Emperor had a vague answer to this person's identity. He was basically convinced that this mysterious expert was the same person as the youngster who had killed President Bai. However, he did not know what the young man looked like. The only clue he had was the young man's brother. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor didn't know everything about Wang Ming. At the very beginning, Night Chief hadn't been able to fully investigate Wang's identity. But Night Ghost Spirit Emperor predicted that this person's identity wouldn't be simple, because the personal information on the ID card was too fake. If he wanted to know the youngster's specific identity, this close to him, Wang Spirit Emperor's Ghost King Mo, the ghost of the best would be. If he wanted to know the young man's identity, this elder brother of his was the best shortcut. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor fiddled with the screen in the air as he looked at Wang Ming's information. Wang Ming didn't have any extra photos, and the one Night Ghost Spirit Emperor was looking at now was that very stupid ID photo. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor narrowed his eyes and instructed one of his subordinates. Continue to follow up on this person. Report to me as soon as you have the latest information. This was the third president under him, Long Ming, an insect emissary, wearing a very thick chemical protective suit and a gas mask on his face. But after Night Ghost Spirit Emperor gave his instructions, Long Ming uncharacteristically didn't respond. Something didn't seem right. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor stood up, and his eyes turned sharp as he instantly became vigilant. In the next moment, Long Ming actually launched an attack on him. Pitch-black poisonous bees gushed out from the gaps of his protective suit like a tide. He knew that Long Ming was probably being controlled. Otherwise, even if Long Ming was given 1,000 guts, he wouldn't have dared to directly attack him. With a wave of his hand, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor unleashed a 5th-tier ice spell. Surging ice mist spewed out of his palm, instantly freezing the wasps into ice cubes that fell to the ground like snowflakes, shattering into pieces. At the same time, Night Ghost's Spirit Emperor gave a low cry. Long Ming, wake up. This low cry was mixed with a sound wave spell, which could purify the mind and free a person whose mind was being controlled. However, the mental strength of the person controlling Long Ming was far beyond Night Ghost's Spirit Emperor's imagination. This level 6 sound wave spell, Sound of Excitement, had no effect on Long Ming at all. In the stalemate, Night Ghost's Spirit Emperor looked out of the corner of his eye and saw that apart from him, everyone else in Night Chief's command center was actually being controlled. Each and every one of them seemed to be frozen in time as they maintained their positions. This was an illusion caused by mental power controlling the brain's thoughts, as if time had stopped. It was clear that this Almighty had used his mental strength to track down the location of Night Chief's headquarters, and had launched this surprise attack. Night Ghost's Spirit Emperor's heart trembled. It looked like he would have to change the location of the headquarters again. After he had been hit by the implementation ball previously, he had already changed the location of the headquarters. Who would have thought that before the first wave was over, another wave would come? At the same time, Night Ghost's Spirit Emperor also deduced the identity of this person. I know who your excellency is. Apart from the commander of Huaxiao Nation's side and one of the famous 10 generals, Wisdom Saint, who else could possess such unimaginably powerful mental strength? President Qi didn't say anything, but manipulated this insect envoy called Long Ming to launch an even fiercer attack. Tens of thousands of insects poured out, and actually formed a maze of their own to surround Night Ghost's Spirit Emperor. Petty tricks. Night Ghost's Spirit Emperor sighed softly. With a gentle flick of his sleeve, these spirit insects were directly wiped out by a ball of starfire. The instant he wiped out these spirit insects, Long Ming actually took the initiative to charge at him and launch an attack. Insect attacks are Long Ming's specialty. If you control his mind, you should use what he's good at. Long Ming's close-range skills are the worst. Night Ghost's Spirit Emperor didn't bother to hide his sneer. The next moment, he saw Long Ming wave his arm, and a slap was aimed directly at his face. Long Ming usually only tickles me when he hits me in close range. Night Ghost's Spirit Emperor laughed again, very happily. He didn't defend himself at all, and took the initiative to stretch out half his face. Come hit me here. Long Ming's body paused. It was clear that the person controlling Long Ming's mind had been frightened by Night Ghost's Spirit Emperor's action. In the next moment, pa! As Long Ming's slap landed solidly on his face, Night Ghost's Spirit Emperor's expression changed dramatically. Like a cannonball, Night Ghost's Spirit Emperor was sent flying out of the command post by this slap. On the other side, inside the military tent, Wang Ling withdrew his mental strength. This was the first time he had seen someone voluntarily stretch out their face for him to slap. He had never heard such a strange request. Chapter 754. Please listen to it on NetEase Cloud Music. Kugu Music and QQ Music will be released simultaneously in the next week. The helplessness of the immortal king. The hopelessness of the mortal king singing. The old is the old and feather sacrifice rabbit, Jiushirjuren and Yujiho. Arrangement. Mill composition. Shinduis mix. Ding Air Dinger. Lyrics/original book. Kuxian. English lyrics. Last night I cultivated until the third hour stageable night till themorning troubled by a trifle worried about Semet anything who can see the helplessness of the immortal king tell me. Can see how helpless this thing one gene of. Flying talismans arising Gina flying talismans tell the past who listens tales without a turnout. My true wish is world peace. My only onetruish in fact for world peace. School life is like duckweed. School life is like duckweed. Schoolify like he duckweed drifting and drifting meeting and parting chasing the dream. All the way chasing Thedrium that's fair in front remembering the elves I caught in my childhood. Recallville Vesthadio Cottacing kid remembering the embarrassing scenes of those years. Recalled Hosea Dyer Santima Sophia yours. Holding hands and looking up hold me handrazier head I have seen every year's brocade seat the splendor officier do not look back with rhythm don't look back you set the bete ballad of the immortal sing the mortal-less ballad strut with head up and chest out walk ahead keep your head high as long as you ifio era here fate will not get out of hand I will never loss me. Chapter 755. The sudden appearance of the sword spirit left Wang Ming and Ghost Headblade dumbfounded. Logically speaking, as an ordinary person without spirit energy, it was almost impossible for Wang Ming to give birth to a sword spirit with his mortal body. But even Ghost Headblade couldn't find a reasonable explanation for what had just happened. This was the daily life of the immortal king, not the diary of a cohabitation with a sword spirit. Could it really be his birthday halo? For a moment, Wang Ming felt that this explanation actually wasn't unreasonable. After all, Wang Ling would always give Wang Ling a present in advance on his birthday in the past. At this summer camp, he had deliberately pulled Wang Ling into the same room as him, which was in fact a hint that Wang Ling could give him a present. But after waiting for a long time, Wang Ling still hadn't given him a present. In this unusual situation, Wang Ming actually had a feeling that Wang Ling might have arranged for this sword spirit to automatically attach itself to his heavenly materials sword on his birthday, because Wang Ming himself clearly remembered telling Wang Ling a while ago that he was improving the heavenly materials sword. At that time, the summer camp hadn't started yet, so if this sword spirit had really been sent by Wang Ling, he indeed had plenty of time to make arrangements. Thinking this, Wang Ming cupped his chin and carefully sized up the long-haired young man in front of him. Suddenly, he remembered the self-introduction of this sword spirit with dead fish eyes. "Wait, you said you're called Kuan Shan?" The young man nodded. "That was my name in my previous life. The new Lord Swordmaster can call me Heavenly Materials. The name of a sword spirit follows the name of the Swordmaster's sword. You actually remember your previous life?" Wang Ming was startled. He looked at the dark blue spirit sword in his hand. He remembered that it was called Kuan Shan. It couldn't be such a coincidence, right? "Of course I remember." The young man sighed. "In my previous life, the previous sword master tricked me, and I unfortunately fell into the Dead Sea of Space. Now that I've been summoned by Heavenly Tao to meet the new Lord Sword Master, I never thought that we would still be in this vast ocean. It seems that this really is fate. May I ask if Lord Sword Master is traveling right now?" "No," Wang Ming shook his head. "Look carefully, this is the Dead Sea of Space." The young man. Heavenly Materials seemed to have suffered a blow, and didn't speak for a long time. He just gazed at the boundless Dead Sea of Space with watery eyes, his expression a little sad, as if the memory of his previous life had just happened yesterday. The memories of the sword spirit would not disappear. Destroying itself was equivalent to abandoning the original sword master. The calamity of falling into the Heavenly Tao's reincarnation was the punishment of the Heavenly Tao. He had experienced the calamity of reincarnation for more than 100 years before he was finally freed and reborn. Who would have thought that he would go such a big circle and come back? Heavenly Materials of Heavenly Materials a heaven? After all, after Wang of Heaved Heavens, Ming Tian of God. Wang of God, Ming Ling Sword Cultivator. Ming Chen. Wang Ming Ming of King Ming. Master Chen. Chen. Ming 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 Spirit 2. Ming. Blade. Sword. Ming. Ling. Ling. He. Ghost Headblade instantly gave off a sinister and ferocious aura. Heavenly Materials shrugged. "I don't think I can. Wang Ming. So you'd better stay alive." Heavenly Materials. However, Wang Ming also noticed a very interesting phenomenon. Although they both had dead fish eyes, it seemed that the less they spoke, the stronger they were. In the blink of an eye, half a day had passed. Wang Ming had already assembled more and more parts from the broken magic treasures on the surface of the sea, and put them all away in his storage ring. "Help me cut this." Wang Ming gave a rice cooker magic treasure that he had fished up to Heavenly Materials. There was a broken talisman seal on it, and Wang Ming speculated that it was probably some kind of sealing magic treasure. Because of Heavenly Materials' appearance, the cutting speed of the item was greatly increased, which just so happened to solve Wang Ming's urgent problem. Heavenly Materials' appearance wasn't completely useless. Although Ghost Headblade didn't say anything, he had been watching from the side the whole time. Every time he asked Wang Ming about the progress, Wang Ming would say that it was almost done. Ghost Headblade needed to wait for Wang Ming to assemble the thing before he made his move. Although the rice cooker that he had fished up was already broken, it contained what Wang Ming wanted the most. He wanted to transform it into a hub that could be embedded with a spirit power core, and use the hub as a power source to finally control the entire machine. What he wanted to invent wasn't just a spirit power amplifier. Instead, it was a humanoid, wearable magic treasure similar to Head of State 001. But Wang Ming felt that even if he invented this machine, it could only be used once at most, because he had calculated many of the parameters on the design blueprint in his head. It wasn't that he wasn't confident in his mental calculations, but that the best way to assemble such a complicated machine was to use scientific equipment to make precise deductions, and only after repeated calculations hundreds of times would a better result be achieved. Now Wang Ming could only ensure that the machine he had invented was as durable as possible, and that it would be able to weather the storm. After all, the materials he had collected now weren't afraid of the spatial spirit liquid's corrosion, and would have no problem withstanding the spatial storm. In any case, it was fine as long as they could leave this dead sea of space. Time ticked by. At that moment, Ghost Headblade finally sensed that something wasn't right. He had seen the blueprint for the spirit power amplification cannon, which Wang Ming had provided him, and there weren't as many parts on it as there were now. Although he didn't know what these parts were for or what they were used for, Ghost Headblade felt that he could still count them. His math teacher had died early, and he himself wasn't very educated, but he still knew 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Brat, what on earth are you playing at? The small pitch-black blade was already floating in the air, emitting a frightening pressure. While Wang Ming had been assembling the machine, Ghost Headblade hadn't been idle either. He had been adjusting his breathing all this time. The spirit energy in the dead sea of space was very thin, but it wasn't non-existent. After such a long time, Ghost Headblade had recovered a lot. Done. Just as Ghost Headblade asked this question, Wang Ming had finished bottling the last part, the spirit power hub. Heavenly treasure. Cover me. At that moment, Wang Ming got up and inserted the ring which contained spirit energy into the spirit power hub. In the next moment, countless parts flew out of the ring and, as if they had been given life, wrapped Wang Ming up tightly from head to toe. Heavenly treasure turned pale with fright. Lord Swordmaster. This is... He knew that Wang Ming was just an ordinary person, but when Wang Ming had been assembling the machine just now, Heavenly Treasure had also noticed something special about him. It turned out that his sword master wasn't ordinary at all, but a genuine genius. Damn it, how dare you lie to me? You didn't make an amplification cannon at all. Ghost Headblade finally realized that he had been deceived, and flew into a rage as he prepared to attack Wang Ming. No, I did. Wang Ming smiled and shook his head. He had indeed made a spirit power amplification cannon, but he had put it in the form of parts on the left and right arms of his mecha armor. How is that possible? You're just a mortal. How can you defeat a cultivator? Ghost Headblade roared. I'm no longer Wang Ming. Wang Ming stared at Ghost Headblade, his expression instantly turning cold. I am Nuhulu Wang Ming. That was it. At that moment, Wang Ming raised his right arm. An automatic aiming lens had already appeared out of thin air in his eye sockets. Everything was done in one go. This mecha armor had an automatic mechanism to identify killing intent, and it almost instantly locked onto Ghost Headblade. At that moment, Ghost Headblade was actually so frightened that he froze. Chapter 756. Ghost Headblade had never felt this intense sense of crisis before Wang Ming made his appearance in full armor. Even in his current injured state, Wang Ming was just an ant that Ghost Headblade could crush at any time he wanted in his normal state. Wang Ming was very smart, but in the end he was just an ordinary person, so it wasn't a big deal. This was what Ghost Headblade had always thought before Wang Ming was fully armed. But as it turned out, Ghost Headblade's attitude was still a little too arrogant. Nowadays, in the era of national cultivation, those cultivators with a certain level of cultivation always had a contemptuous attitude towards ordinary people, and the number of such cultivators was actually not small, almost half of the population. Hence, as an ordinary person, Wang Ming was teaching cultivators like Ghost Headblade, who looked down on ordinary people, a lesson. Knowledge was power. Knowledge could indeed change one's fate. Take this. Following Wang Ming's roar, the aiming lens had already locked onto Ghost Headblade with precision. Although Ghost Headblade was currently just a blade and was very small, Wang Ming had already considered this factor long ago, and had changed the Spirit Power Amplification Cannon into a Spirit Power Amplification Tracking Cannon. No need to hold your breath. No need to cheat. It could also automatically lock onto you. Identify killing intent. Self-aim for a headshot. But because the recoil of this cannon was extremely strong, the moment it was fired, Wang Ming's entire body was swiftly sent flying backward. This clumsy assembly of magic treasures was made from waste magic treasures from the Dead Sea of Space, and the weight of the materials in each part wasn't particularly uniform. Wang Ming had already done his best to compare the materials and find magic treasures with similar densities. Wang Ming had already done his best to compare the materials and find magic treasures of similar density, but after firing this cannon, Wang Ming was still deeply aware of the mecha armor's flaws. He would just take it as experimental data. Wang Ming was already determined that after he got out of here, he would build a second-generation mecha as soon as possible. The powerful recoil made Wang Ming's arm ache, but it was still within the limits of what he could endure. The pain was like a muscle being stretched. As he was sent flying backward by the recoil, the mecha armor's suspension stabilizer was activated at the same time. Seeing this, heavenly materials hurriedly turned into a stream of light and flew behind Wang Ming to support him against the recoil together. Accompanied by an intense wave of light, an enormous umbrella-shaped beam of light shot straight in Ghost Headblade's direction. For a moment, the spirit power in the Dead Sea of Space surged, and the spirit liquid water instantly evaporated into clouds of steam. Ghost Headblade realized that he couldn't dodge the cannon shot. It was a homing cannon, and the moment it fired, he was locked onto. Damn, a mere mortal also wanted to show off in front of him? Hidden Ghost Blade technique. Ghost Headblade knew that he wouldn't be able to avoid it, so he used his blade technique and slashed at the light cannon. A dazzling purple saber gleam lit up in the void and rushed towards the light cannon, attempting to split it in half. But in the end, Ghost Headblade had still underestimated Wang Ming's blast. He was already injured, and although he had recovered some spirit energy earlier, it had been stored up for the purpose of possessing Wang Ming's body, and the strength he had saved up was far from enough. Blade Ming of Blade. Of Wang Blade Ming's light cannon. In the end, this mecha armor, which had been assembled from discarded magic treasures in the Dead Sea of Space, was beyond Ghost Headblade's imagination. In the end, this mecha armor, which had been assembled from discarded magic treasures in the Dead Sea of Space, was beyond Ghost Headblade's imagination. Even Heavenly Materials behind him was amazed. His master was just an ordinary person, but had actually relied on this mecha armor to fight a cultivator who was almost at the soul formation stage. Is he dead? In the distance, Wang Ming was standing in the air by relying on the mecha armor's suspension system. Wang Ming had previously invented a flying device for himself, so he wasn't weak in terms of proficiency and balance when it came to flying. Furthermore, Wang Ming hadn't come up with this humanoid mecha armor magic treasure on a whim in the Dead Sea of Space. The blueprint had long since been etched deeply into his mind. He had had this idea as early as when he had been researching the humanoid magic treasure, head of State 001, but he had never put it into practice. Wang Ming had now relied on discarded magic treasures to assemble this mecha armor purely because he had no other choice, since he was still at the stage of collecting the materials for the real mecha armor. Apart from testing head of State 001's performance, following Wang Ling, spying on him, peeping on him, bullying him, teasing him, and asking him for a birthday present, Wang Ming's biggest goal as a teacher at the summer camp this time was to collect the main materials for the mecha armor. This had been approved by Huaxiao Alliance, and Wang Ming could freely and appropriately choose his own materials in the remains. This was a privilege which Old Qi had given him, and Wang Ming still had that document stamped with his seal on it. Wang Ming gazed at the rolling steam in front of him and sighed softly, because this mecha armor still lacked the auxiliary ability of spiritual perception, and Wang Ming himself wasn't a cultivator. He had no way of determining whether Ghost Headblade was dead or not. But he was sure that Ghost Headblade had definitely been severely injured by that blow just now. Even if he wasn't dead, Ghost Headblade already didn't have the strength to struggle. In the days to come, his body was bound to disintegrate bit by bit as it soaked in the spatial spirit fluid, and his soul would then suffer the curse of the ancient artifact spirit. Heavenly Materials' question confirmed Wang Ming's thoughts at the moment. Lord Swordmaster, do you want to give him the last hit? He already doesn't have the strength to struggle. Forget it. Wang Ming shook his head. Actually, it wasn't that he didn't want to give him the last hit, but that blast just now had directly used up 32% of his spirit power. The spirit power hub only had 40% of its reputation left. He had to save up this spirit power to break through the space wall and get out. Thus, Wang Ming no longer paid attention to Ghost Headblade. Instead, he flew as high as possible. If there's a space storm later, do your best to protect me. Very well, Lord Swordmaster. Heavenly Materials' response was very gentle. The master of Immortal Mansion had carefully selected and polished this material, and it was the only one in the world. It was so hard that it didn't fear a space storm at all. Then, Heavenly Materials took the initiative to hug Wang Ming's lower back, ready to resist the impact of the spirit power blast. Ready? Wang Ming took a deep breath and counted down from 3 in his heart. There was a loud bang. He raised his hand and fired the second blast at the very top of the Dead Sea of Space. This blast was a resurrection blast, and it was also Wang Ming's oath as an ordinary person. After this blast, Wang Ming would reappear in the world with a new identity. Chapter 757. On the other side, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor Hu Wangling had borrowed President Qi's mental energy to possess Insect Envoy Long Ming and had slapped him, finally woke up from his coma. But even though he had woken up, he was in very poor condition, and didn't even have the strength to get up. This slap wasn't like the ones he had given Evil Sword God back then. Wang Ling had undone half of the talisman seal, so even if he didn't use all his strength, it was still 50%. Combined with all the slaps he had given so far, this slap was of very high quality. In terms of grades, Evil Sword God slaps could only be classified as ordinary slaps. Further up were Slightly Serious Slap, Very Serious Slap, Extremely Serious Slap, Expert Appraisal Slap, and Ultimate Buddha's Palm. And this slap just happened to reach the Very Serious Slap level. This slap hadn't just hit his body. Even Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's soul had been shaken, and he had suffered pain and torture. At that moment, although Night Ghost Spirit Emperor had already woken up, he couldn't move at all. He felt as if every acupuncture point and pore had become an erupting volcano, and he was burning with pain. That kind of mental energy just now. He was sure that it was definitely Huaxiao Nation's Wisdom Saint. He was very familiar with that aura. Although he had never fought Wisdom Saint face to face before, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor believed that he had a certain understanding of him. The other party was good at using mental energy to control things from afar, and in this world, the only person who could use mental energy to this extent was Wisdom Saint. Mental energy was a kind of power that was cultivated from a young age, and was different from spirit energy. It didn't need to be used on a spirit root, but it was extremely difficult to cultivate. President Qi's actual combat ability wasn't strong, because his mental energy had already reached the pinnacle. As far as Night Ghost Spirit Emperor knew, there was no one in this world who could cultivate mental energy and spirit energy at the same time. This was the principle that you couldn't have your cake and eat it too. So although this slap had landed on Night Ghost Spirit Emperor, he had never expected it to be from Wang Ling. As he wailed endlessly, he just felt that the power of this slap was too inconceivable. Huaxiao Alliance. It seemed that he really couldn't underestimate this place. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor suddenly felt that he knew too little about the 10 generals, and that he had to investigate them in depth. He had always thought that President Qi was just a mental expert, and never expected him to have such terrifying attainments in cultivation. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor realized that he had made a mistake. Sometimes, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will emerge victorious. In this world there were people who made mistakes every day. It wasn't too late to find out the truth now. Otherwise, when little sister Milk Tea was little sister Matcha, at that time, it would be too late to regret it. As he lay on the ground enduring the pain of the slap, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor pondered this thought-provoking thought. After about 10 minutes, there was still no movement from Night Chief. That slap had sent him too far away, and Night Ghost Spirit Emperor was now lying in the Gobi Desert. Who knew how long it would take for those idiots to find him? So in the end, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor could only think of a way to save himself. His injuries were severe, and he could only constantly release perfected immortal true chi to heal his injuries. However, the slap just now had the effect of severely injuring him. Even if he used perfected immortal true chi, the rate at which his injuries recovered was like a snail climbing a tree. It was a pain in the ass. Poor Night Ghost Spirit Emperor could only slowly recover from his injuries and start to try to move his fingers. In this kind of situation, he could only cast some one-handed healing spells. Thus another 20 minutes passed. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor could finally move one of his fingers. This was the moment. Great Soul Cultivation Spell. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor only used one finger to make a seal. In a split second, with Night Ghost Spirit Emperor at its center, a deep blue magic array with complex runes appeared on the ground. Light lingered over the magic array, and countless souls hovered above Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's head to repair his soul. This Great Soul Cultivation Spell was something Night Ghost Spirit Emperor had created based on the Dark Pastor collection of a foreign forbidden technique, the Bible of Darkness. In theory, it was also a forbidden technique that couldn't be recognized internationally. Its main principle was to use the souls that Night Ghost Spirit Emperor was constantly devouring to control them, and turn them into his slaves to heal his soul's injuries. Once these summoned souls ran out of soul power, they would be completely annihilated. But from the moment he incorporated these souls, they had already become his slaves and were pawns that he could discard at any time. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor closed his eyes and enjoyed the comfort of these souls being repaired. Although he was now lying on the ground in the Gobi Desert, it felt like he was in an outdoor spa. A moment later, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's arms and hands were mostly healed, and he could already move. He made another seal and checked his soul warehouse, which contained all the souls he had devoured over the last 100 years. That's right, that brat Baija. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor suddenly smiled sinisterly as he thought of President Bai. He had just devoured President Bai's soul a while ago, and he still remembered that President Bai's ability to recover was extremely strong. Just in time, I'll use Baija's soul to help my venerable self recover. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's wishful thinking was very good. Thus, when his soul was almost 20 to 30% healed, he summoned someone from his soul warehouse. Baija, come out. A white figure slowly appeared in front of him. This person was none other than President Bai, whom Night Ghost Spirit Emperor had devoured. It was obvious that President Bai had been tortured in the soul warehouse. His hair was disheveled and his cheeks were sunken in. The environment of the soul warehouse was similar to that of a prison. Tens of thousands of strong souls were imprisoned here, and new souls would definitely receive the so-called baptism of newbies. Baija, you look a lot more haggard? Night Ghost Spirit Emperor chuckled. You're not qualified to say that. President Bai stared at Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's sorry figure and said in an icy voice, kneel. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor only gave the order, but President Bai's knees already couldn't help but bend down. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor raised his hand and lifted President Bai's chin with the air of someone who held great power. Now you're my slave. No matter how sorry I look, as a soul slave, I advise you to be careful with your words. Otherwise, it wouldn't be good if you were turned to ashes. If I want to, I can throw you into the Great Soul Repairing Spells Array at any time as raw material. Understand? Chapter 758. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor was lying on the ground, enjoying the massage from the Great Soul Cultivation Array's soul slave, and he had a very lazy expression on his face. President Bai was still kneeling in front of him. Originally, I only wanted to keep you in the soul vault and wait for the opportunity to digest you and obtain your recovery ability. However, I've changed my mind. Do you know why? Night Ghost Spirit Emperor suddenly said. President Bai pursed his lips and said nothing. After waiting for a while, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor could only answer his own question. The Bai clan's creation art is #1 in the world. It's as famous as the Toya clan's unusual elixir technique and the Shao clan's alchemy technique. If I hadn't taken you in as my subordinate, you would have been executed by your clansmen. Later, with my help, you inherited the orthodoxy of the White Clan, which is why you have your current status. President Bai's face instantly darkened. Your Excellency, what do you want to say? If I devour your soul and seize your technique, I will instantly know all the memories in your mind. However, I personally saved you back then, so I really can't bear to kill you now. Although you've made a huge mistake this time, I still plan to spare your life on account of our past friendship. If I hadn't used the 10,000 Li soul chase to keep your soul, how long do you think you could have lasted against that young man? Night Ghost Spirit Emperor said. President Bai was instantly speechless. Even his body began to tremble uncontrollably. Ever since he had been beaten by Wang Ling, he would suffer from this kind of aftereffect from time to time. Every time he thought of it, it was fear. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor smiled softly and crooked his finger, and a white jade scroll appeared in the air. President Bai took it with both hands, and was amazed to find that he could actually directly touch the scroll as a soul. This is a soul book, an item used to communicate with spirit bodies. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor said, I want you to write down the cultivation method of the creation art on this jade scroll, word for word. President Bai finally knew what Night Ghost Spirit Emperor was going to do, and his expression instantly froze. This is my Bai clan's secret technique. I knew that this was a secret magic of your White Clan, but do you have any other choice? Night Ghost Spirit Emperor smiled sinisterly. I know you expected me to lock your soul after you died, and then find a chance to devour you. That's why you put a curse on your soul, didn't you? President Bai was speechless. His curse had been very discreet, but he hadn't expected Night Ghost Spirit Emperor to still see through it. But back then, this curse hadn't been deliberately aimed at President Bai. Anyone who destroyed his soul would be cursed. President Bai had initially thought that if he was defeated in his battle with that youngster, and that the latter wouldn't let go of his soul, he would at least be able to cast a curse on the youngster, so that he would be plagued with calamities and misfortune, which could be considered revenge for what he had done to him. As for Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's imagination, it was actually reasonable. Although this curse wasn't meant to be cast on Night Ghost Spirit Emperor, it was in fact meant to guard against him. Thus, when he had cast the curse back then, President Bai had already thought of many subsequent possibilities. Baizha, you are indeed clever. But compared to me, he's still a bit too inexperienced. Of course, as long as you clearly write down the Bai clan's creation art, word for word, I can let bygones be bygones. I can even reconstruct your body and spare your dog life. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor raised his hand and a soul brush fell, his tone brooking no refusal. So write it. President Bai took a deep breath. He had no way to argue and could only do it. The creation art was a new spell developed during the Bai clan's heyday back then, and was later revered as the clan's ancestral secret skill. In the clan, President Bai was originally just a son of a concubine, and had never had the opportunity to learn. His mother had a lowly status, and was just a favored songstress. Even after her death, she couldn't enter the clan's ancestral hall, and the memorial tablet could only be placed in President Bai's room. As he wrote down this secret skill, Baizha recalled his experience when he had first met Night Ghost Spirit Emperor. At that time, Night Chief had just started out, and Night Ghost Spirit Emperor had been recruiting people everywhere. That was when the Bai clan's internal strife happened. As for why Night Ghost Spirit Emperor had chosen him in the end, President Bai had been investigating for the last 100 years, and had finally learned the truth. Your Excellency, I'm done. Baizha quickly presented the Jade Scroll. The creation of a spell was nothing more than a few core nomological formulas. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor had a high opinion of himself, and if he wrote down everything, the other party would be displeased. So Baizha just wrote down the core formula for the spell on the scroll, which made Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's eyes light up. The basic formula for a spell was the same, and only the core nomological formulas were the quintessence. This was like writing the universal chord in a musical melody. For 5-3, 6-2-5-1. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor was very satisfied with President Bai's performance. "Baizha, you're a smart man. Your Excellency praises me too much." President Bai's face was expressionless as he knelt on the ground like a slave obediently obeying his master's orders, as obedient as a puppy. Night Ghost Spirit Emperor sighed endlessly at this scene. He had chosen Baizha back then because he had taken a fancy to Baizha's rebellious nature. Who would have thought that after being thrown into the soul repository, this nature would be worn away instead? Night Ghost Spirit Emperor stared at this scene, his heart filled with disappointment and frustration. Actually, this was also good. At the very least, he now had another reason to keep Baizha alive. At that moment, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's soul injury had already recovered by nearly 40%, and he already had the strength. He got up from the ground and started to learn the core formula for the creation art which Baizha had given him. A true immortal expert could learn spells at an extremely heaven-defying speed. Especially someone as experienced as Night Ghost Spirit Emperor, who only needed a few glances to break down these formulas, memorize them, and learn them at the speed of light. A torrent of blue spirit energy turned into steam and rose from Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's 7 orifices. Is this the Bai clan's creation art? Night Ghost Spirit Emperor was overjoyed. His injuries really were recovering at a rapid pace. But this state of joy didn't last long, as Night Ghost Spirit Emperor soon discovered that something was wrong. Although the injuries to his skin, flesh, tendons, and bones were rapidly healing, the injuries to his soul seemed to be on the verge of breaking apart. All of a sudden, Night Ghost Spirit Emperor's vision went black, and his entire body felt weak and exhausted. At that moment, President Bai finally stood up and smiled. "Lord Spirit Emperor, is my Bai clan's creation art still useful?" Night Ghost Spirit Emperor finally realized the reason for this abnormality. He glared at President Bai with wide, angry eyes. "What did you do?" "Back then, Your Excellency viewed the Bai clan as a great threat. You only kept me as your loyal dog and purged the rest of the clan. But before you purged my ancestor, Your Excellency should have carefully investigated my Bai clan's history." Hands behind his back, President Bai had a smug expression on his face. "Has Your Excellency heard of the reverse polarity?" Night Ghost Spirit Emperor seemed to think of something, and finally looked alarmed. This Baizha, as expected, he was evil. Chapter 759. On the other side, Wang Ming's second shot was a success, which had used up 28% of his spirit power reserves. Now he only had 12% left, which he had to use to break through the space wall and fight his way out. A space fissure appeared, and at the same time, Wang Ming's mecha armor gave him a system prompt. Space fissure ahead, estimated time until fissure closes. 243 seconds. Remaining energy, 12%. This was the mecha armor's built-in computing system, but it wasn't artificial intelligence at all. If it could be combined with a satellite design, it would be even more humane and intelligent. But for now, Wang Ming could only do this with the junk from the Dead Sea of Space. Just as the system had said, although the spatial rift had opened, it wouldn't last for long. This was the best time to rush out. "You are not allowed to leave." Just as he was about to move, Ghost Headblade's angry roar came from below. There was a flash of light as Ghost Headblade made a show of using the last bit of his strength to keep Wang Ming here. "Your Excellency Sword Master, leave quickly. I'll cover the rear." Heavenly Materials pushed Wang Ming forward. "That won't do. If you want to leave, we'll leave together." Wang Ming grabbed Heavenly Material. He knew that Heavenly Material's former self was Kuan Shan, a pitiful sword spirit who had been cheated by his master and had sunk into silence in the Dead Sea of Space for 100 years. In the end, he had been so lonely that he had self-destructed. Wang Ming really couldn't bear to leave Heavenly Material here. But there was no more time to think about it. Just at that moment, another space fissure appeared in the air, and a snow-white stream of light swiftly streaked past Wang Ming's eyes before finally striking Ghost Headblade with unerring accuracy. Ah! Ghost Headblade let out a miserable howl of pain. Wang Ming. Heavenly Materials. What was that? Someone had crushed Ghost Headblade to death. Moreover, this stream of light did not seem to be a spell, but a concealed weapon. Unfortunately, this mysterious expert's attack was just too fast. The current mecha's ability was completely unable to capture and locate the hidden weapon's image. Heavenly Materials was quick to react. He swept up a sword chi and grabbed at the void. His hands were immediately stained with some white powder. Heavenly Materials frowned, feeling that this thing was a bit like chalk dust. Could it be young Master Ling? Heavenly Materials suddenly asked. Wang Ming, do you know my little brother? Heavenly Materials smiled faintly, reporting to the sword master, after I became the sword spirit of this sword. I became the sword spirit of this sword. From the day this sword was successfully forged, everything that happened has been sealed in my mind as a memory. This shouldn't be my brother's doing. Wang Ming shook his head. If it had been my younger brother, he would have been even more ruthless. This ghost head blade probably wouldn't even have been able to scream before he died on the spot. Heavenly Materials. Wang Ming raised his eyebrows. No matter who the mysterious person was, he had no time to worry about it now. The most important thing right now is to get out of here. Thinking this, Wang Ming raised his eyes and operated the mecha armor side by side with Heavenly Materials as they plunged into the space fissure. At the same time, in the real remains, the living cells that had fled earlier had almost all been cleaned up. Fortunately, Wu Zhenjuan had given timely instructions this time, and the inside of the remains hadn't suffered too much damage. However, the aftermath of Night Chief's actions this time would be immeasurable, and what they really needed to guard against were the international gossip that would follow. Devil Valley's Beast King's remains. This feng shui treasure land had long been eyed by various countries. Now that something had happened, Mishio Nation definitely wouldn't let go of this opportunity, and would appeal to the international community to set up a joint army to manage it. In the dense forest to the east of Beast King's remains, Ajua's special operations team had cleaned up almost half of the living cells. That was because they had Wuji on their side, who was like a living human radar. It was too easy for her to sense the summoned cells that had fled. Wu Zhenjuan, I finished cleaning up here and executed these living cells on the spot. But how do you think we should deal with these corpses? In the rainbow glass box, Wu Zhenjuan quickly replied. Thank you for your hard work, Director Zhua. These cell corpses don't need any special treatment. They contain a lot of organic matter, which can be used as fertilizer. I see. Ajua nodded. Wu Zhenjuan nodded. Also, we just detected a strange spatial fluctuation in the west, but we're not sure if it has anything to do with Teacher Wang's disappearance. Can Director Zhua lead a team to check it out? The teachers we sent out previously have been ordered by the higher-ups to summon them back for the meeting. If Director Zhua can't go, I can only send someone over the next day. Ajua hurriedly replied. Wu Zhenjuan, what are you talking about? Since we're the special operations team, we naturally have a reason to take action. Saving people is like fighting a fire. Wu Zhenjuan was overjoyed. In that case, thank you very much, Director Zhua. After the call ended, Ajua looked at the people around him. Wu Zhenjuan said that he detected spatial fluctuations in the west of the remains, and suspects that they have something to do with Lord Wang Ming. I also felt the fluctuations not long after they appeared. Wuji frowned. When she detected abnormal fluctuations, the bandages on her face would tighten, and when the space was normal, the bandages would appear a little looser. Wuji herself hadn't noticed this phenomenon, but Fatty Luo had long ago noticed it, and had told Ajua about it. As a somewhat famous weaponsmith, Fatty Luo's ability to observe magic artifacts was exceptionally accurate. It was only Wuji herself who hadn't realized the change in the bandages on her face. It seemed that the spatial fluctuations were indeed real. Considering what Wuji had said before, Wang Ming might have been sucked into the Dead Sea of Space. If he wasn't in danger, the Dead Sea of Space would definitely spit him back out as a foreign object. Therefore, the abnormal spatial fluctuations might really have been caused by the space Wang Ming had been spat out. Let's go take a look. Ajua didn't hesitate in the slightest. Right now, the only ones who could move freely in the remains were their special operations team. Furthermore, they now had a legitimate reason to search the western part of the remains. Apart from finding out whether that spatial fluctuation was Wang Ming's or not, they now had a legitimate reason to search the western part of the remains. Apart from finding out whether the spatial fluctuations belonged to Wang Ming, they could finally achieve their true objective. Because according to Little Silver, Devil King's tomb had been placed in the western part of the remains back then. And if they found this tomb, they might be able to find out the real reason why Devil King had been eaten in his sleep back then. All these years, there had been rumors in the outside world that Devil King hadn't really died. Whether this was a rumor, or the truth would only be known after further investigation. Inside the rainbow glass box, the summer camp had been forced to stop because of the riot in the evening. It was now dinner time, and the students from several schools were discussing this matter. Even Li Mingyao and Zhou Yuzheng, who had been searching for Wang Ling earlier, had temporarily forgotten to look for him. In a restaurant, Wang Ling, Little Peanut, Super Chun and Dopey Guo were sitting at a table. Did you hear? Someone saw a mysterious person appear when the sea and sky spell formation was activated, and scared away the summoned creatures that came out of the spell formation. Bullshit again. Why are there so many metaphysical things? You don't know, but I heard that Senior Ajua also came this time, and as a member of the Special Operations team. That mysterious person might be Senior Ajua, Dopey Guo said with a shrug. Wang Ling raised his eyebrows. It was very obvious which uncle had provided this information. Isn't there a saying that there's no peace in this world, but some people carry our burdens from behind the scenes? On the other side, Super Chin also chimed in. Heh, a mysterious person made a move. I'd rather believe that Wang Ling climbed a tree. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.